Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto loses his purpose after being betrayed and lands in Yokai Gakuen. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. One blonde-haired shinobi, one who had bright blue eyes, an orange jumpsuit with a bit of blue on it, was walking away from the Hokage's tower. He had finished his meeting regarding the circumstances of his graduation and consequences of said graduation. Reading between the lines, that meant he graduated by the seat of his pants and the council was pushing for punishment or at least stunt his abilities in any way possible. Naruto had gone to meet the old man to get some advice on how to handle said situation, as well as being in a team with the guy with the biggest stick up his ass in the village along with his personal cheerleading squad. Sarutobi had been vague, but Naruto deduced by himself that he had to keep his guard up. He wasn't stupid. Now that he knew about the Kyuubi, he could plan for the future. Before this, he didn't exactly have the information, resources or the jurisdiction to do anything about the abuse he received. Shaking his head, he grabbed his stomach as it growled and decided to get some food. It was pretty late out, actually, but he knew that they would still be open. Well, at least Ichiraku's would be open. They always were, well, for him that is. He was pretty tired, but he was happy nonetheless. He now knew why people hated him. Although he hated their prejudice at him for something far out of his control, he didn't blame them, but he could plan for eventualities. He sighed as he arrived at his favorite restaurant, Ichiraku's Ramen. Akasha Bloodriver paced back and forth from her palace-like home. Issa Shuzen stood beside her trying to comfort her, but to no avail. She didn't even bat her eye at his ministrations once. He knew why his wife was like this, of course, but didn't want to cause a problem. He was pretty upset as well. Issa Shuzen was a proud and vicious vampire, but he did care for his daughters somewhat. As a father, he didn't approve of them going out to gain experience, as Mocha put it. As a vampire, he fully supported the idea for his two youngest daughters to go out and experience the world. Somewhat. He sighed inwardly at both girls in front of him. Mocha, Cocoa, he paused and brought his thumb and index finger to his nose. I'll allow you to go there to train. The shouts of his younger daughter interrupted his and Mocha slapped her in the head so she could shut up. However, Issa could still see the smile on his third daughter's face. He gave a nod of approval to Mocha. Thank you, Mocha. Now, as I was saying, you'll get to go there, but you cannot associate yourself with the humans. They're different, believe me. He looked at his wife as she continued to pace back and forth. I know. He glanced back at them. Mocha and Cocoa nodded. They were both excited, but one of them hid it better than the other. Thanks, father, they said together. Issa nodded and waved them off. They took that as the cue and left. Issa looked towards his wife again and she stopped. She gave him a glare and looked towards her daughter's retreating forms. Be careful. The blonde-haired shinobi was the only person left in the small roadside stall, enabling him to at least enjoy his ramen without acting like a ramen vacuum. As he finished his 11th bowl of ramen and was getting ready to start his next bowl when he heard someone scream. He looked up from his position and looked around. He asked the chef and his daughter at the ramen shop if they heard a scream, but Tuchi and Ayame looked at Naruto funny and they just shook their heads slowly. Naruto shrugged it off, deciding it was nothing worth his attention at the moment, and went back to eating his ramen. His head was full of thoughts already. Adding screaming into his thought pattern would be really condescending. He really didn't want a migraine now. After a few precious minutes of idle chat with the ramen maker and his daughter, Naruto finished his 12th bowl of ramen and paid the bill. He thanked both ramen stall owner and left with his usual huge grin on his face. Ramen really cheered him up. It was the ultimate comfort food, or rather the only food he could get without being charged 10 times more. It was why he would always be faithful to ramen. As Naruto started to walk back to his house to get his gear to start training, since he was officially a ninja thanks to Iruka-sensei, his old academy teacher, he heard the scream again. This time, it was far more audible. He looked around and noticed that no one else had heard it. He was confused by that. How could nobody hear the scream beside himself? He shrugged and decided that since no one heard it, investigated himself to see what it was. He walked around the outskirts of town as he continued to hear crashes. He saw a few of the trees in the secluded area behind the mountain, that the Hokage's faces were carved in, had started to fall. Now he was curious. He made his way towards the monument until he finally arrived. Naruto quickly hid among the branches of one of the trees surrounding what he presumed was a battlefield. He looked down intently to see something that completely shocked him. There were craters everywhere and tons of trees that had been knocked over, but what truly shocked him were the two girls in one of the craters. Two small girls with enough strength to create craters? The smallest one had orange hair tied up in two pigtails with emerald green eyes. She had a one-piece red dress on and it looked really expensive. However, the cuts and smudges on the dress made it look like a rag. The bruises on her body were another matter. She was on her knee and was leaning on one knee. Naruto figured she was probably a few years younger than him. Then he turned his attention to the other one. She had long silver hair with red eyes that had black slits in each. She had a one-piece dress as well, but it was silver like her hair. However, unlike the younger one, she didn't have a scratch on her. His heartbeat skipped a few beats all of a sudden and Naruto couldn't stop staring at her. He thought she looked absolutely beautiful in his eyes. An immediate attraction was clearly visible in his eyes. She looked unique. He'd never seen that shade of royal silver and crimson red before. Maybe that was one of the reasons why she stood out. He found himself drawn at the way her hair waved. He was mesmerized. He shook his head. However, before he knew it, he started tree jumping toward them just to get a better perspective. "Sister, one more round please," Kokoa begged. Mocha rolled her eyes. "No Kokoa, you already can barely stand. Take a break for a while, then you can try to attack me again." Mocha glared at her sister to add more affect. Naturally it didn't work. Kokoa started to get up, ignored what her sister said, and charged forward to hit her in the head with a straight punch. Mocha got angrier that her sister had just ignored her. Ducking the punch, the silver-haired vampiress kicked Kokoa in the stomach to the point where Kokoa went flying and crashed against a tree with a loud crack and thud when she hit the ground. Kokoa, barely conscious, leaned against the tree holding her stomach. She tried stubbornly to get up but was scared at what her sister was going to do next since she disobeyed her. Mocha started to walk toward Kokoa when all of a sudden there was a thud and a yell of pain as something fell out of the tree right behind Kokoa. Startled by the sound, Mocha quickly turned around in a stance to attack. What she saw was a blonde-haired boy with 3 whisker marks on each cheek with sky-blue eyes and an orange-blue jumpsuit. He had a huge grin on his face, rubbing the back of his head where it had impacted sea level, but looked quite nervous, and was staring at her more than a little intensity that she was used to seeing. She blushed a little at his look looked so strong, and averted her eyes. She quickly shook it off though and got back into her fighting stance. Kokoa ran up behind her sister and yelled at the blonde, "What the hell do you want?" She was mad that someone had stopped her and her sister from their fighting session. Naruto put his hands behind his head and started to walk toward them. He just ignored her and asked, "Who are you guys? I've never seen you guys on the village before. Are you two new?" He smiled at them again. Mocha looked at him for a second and wondered if she should tell him. She came to a decision at the end and replied, "The name's Mocha Akashiya." She bowed a bit. It wouldn't hurt to be polite to the natives. She gestured to her sister next. "This is my little sister Kokoa Shuzan." After her bow and introduction, she slipped back into her fighting stance. Her father always told her to be on guard. Mocha-chan, that's a really cute name, and the name's Naruto. Naruto smiled a bit wider. "Ah, but you haven't told me if you are new or not." Kokoa was starting to get even madder at how this, Naruto, had just said her sister's name so casually and intimately without getting kicked in the face. However, Naruto noticed Kokoa getting mad. He smiled at her glaring form. "What's wrong, Chibi-chan?" That comment really pissed her off now. She ran at him. She was going to introduce her fist to that infuriating smile on his face. She jumped in the air and brought her fist back and brought it back forward with as much strength that she could muster. She smirked when she heard a nice crunching sound between her fist and Naruto's cheek. Both of the girls were shocked, however, when Naruto went up in poof of smoke and was replaced by a log. They started to look around until they found him leaning casually on a tree behind them. "That's not very nice, Chibi-chan." Naruto didn't have a scratch on him. Mocha saw his unscratched form and smirked a bit. She misjudged him. At first she thought that he was a weakling, but taking her little sister's fist head on unharmed meant something. Especially if that said person comes out of it without a bruise on him. She stepped forward, drawing attention back to her. "Would you fight me?" she asked seriously. A hint of arrogance was found behind her eyes. It almost pissed Naruto off since he'd seen it enough times on Sasuke, but he calmed himself. It wasn't the same, he could detect it was a gentler arrogance. Wow, learning about the Kyuubi really mellowed him out, he mused to himself inwardly. Kokoa, however, stared at her in shock. There was no way this Naruto could stand a chance against her sister. There was also the fact that her sister challenged him, but she shook that off. She almost laughed and looked forward to seeing this Naruto's future beaten body. Naruto's grin got even bigger than before. He found himself excited. He almost felt like shouting. He felt warm and fuzzy. This was actually the first time somebody other than the Hokage and Ichiraku had acknowledged him. He felt something akin to friend develop between him and her, maybe though. A thought went through his head at that. Sure, but if I win, you have to be my friend. Mocha smirked at that, but on the inside she was a bit confused. She never had a friend. The only interaction she had in her life was her family. Friendship was a foreign concept to her. Sure, she arrogantly stated. But that's only if you can beat me. She started to smile. A devious smile. However, if I win, you have to teach me how you just did that thing when Kokoa punched you. She already knew she was going to win. There's no way this boy could beat her. As they both got into their fighting stance, Naruto narrowed his eyes and watched carefully. He had already noted the strength behind the punch, and considering the state of the battlefield, as well as the fact that the older sister seemed a lot stronger than the younger, he came to the conclusion that getting hit was going to be costing him a lot more than just brain cells. Watching each other, they waited for Kokoa to tell them the battle had started. As soon as Kokoa said start, Mocha ran at Naruto. Naruto started doing his hand signs before she reached him though. Shadow clone technique, he exclaimed. In a poof of smoke, 4 other Narutos appeared. That shocked Mocha out of her attack, and it shocked Kokoa even more. The 4 clones took advantage of Mocha's shock and started to circle around Mocha. Mocha snapped out of her shock and eyed her opponents. She latched out to one quickly though. She did a roundhouse kick and managed to hit 2 clones by the time her kick subsided. They disappeared in a poof of smoke. She smirked at how easy they were to destroy. This is going to be easy, she thought. However, she was surprised when a twig next to her exploded in a puff of smoke. The smoke died down, but before it did, a replica of Naruto jumped from the smoke and Mocha took an uppercut to the chin and held the slightly dazed Mocha in place as he called the original out. He told him to attack. Mocha tried to get out of his hold but found the clone strong. She managed to shake him off by a well-placed kick to its stomach. Distracted by the smoke in front of her face, she was soon rewarded with a kick to the face. The 2 blows she received to her face hurt. She knew it hurt. She could feel herself getting dizzy. She rubbed her bloody nose and glared at Naruto. She ran at him and tried to hit him, but he dodged and tripped her with a sweep kick. She fell to the ground but showed athletic ability when she placed her right hand in front of her and pushed herself away from the ground at the last minute. She flew in the air and did a front flip before landing gracefully on the ground. Naruto stood awestruck at her display, and it almost cost him a hit. He narrowly dodged a kick aimed at his chest and countered with a right jab. Mocha dodged as well with a tilt of her head and sent her own jab. Naruto dodged again and this time tried another leg sweep, but she jumped and planted her feet onto Naruto's chest. Certain of her victory, she shouted, "Know your place," as she used the momentum and used his chest as a springboard to snap a kick to his chin with her other leg. Naruto caught her rising leg to avoid a concussion and punched her kneecap as well as push himself away from her. However, Mocha did manage to hit him in his arm with her other leg. But when she landed on the ground, it was not as graceful as the last time. Naruto winced at the pain in his arm and shrugged it off when he saw her land on the ground. He rushed at her and tried an axe kick, but she rolled out the way. She rolled a few meters away before she hit something hard at her side. She looked out to see another Naruto. "Know your own damn place." The clone Naruto brought his fist down and managed to hit her in the face. Since her body was already on the ground, Naruto's fist managed to do more damage. The ground shook, and so did Mocha's body. What she didn't know was that Naruto applied chakra into his muscle to make the attack cause more damage. It worked, but he felt his muscle on his arm tear a bit. He winced but shook it off. He didn't want to show weakness. Mocha groggily tried to stand up, but the clone Naruto kept her in place as he grabbed her by her dress and roughly threw her to the original with a judo throw. The clone dispersed as Mocha went airborne to the real Naruto. Naruto caught Mocha with a lariat, and turned just in time to see her body backflip to the ground with a hard thud. He walked over to her form, breathing hard, and checked the down Mocha. He grinned to himself when he caught her bruised and unconscious form. "What, how?" Kokoa asked from behind, wide-eyed. She turned her attention to Naruto and nervously shifted her eyes between the downed Mocha and the grinning Naruto. "How? Wah, what are you?" Naruto grinned at her question. "I'm." A groan interrupted his introduction. Both saw Mocha stand up from her position. She was clutching her head and walking in a little in circles. "Sister," Kokoa cried, genuinely concerned. "Are you alright?" Mocha stopped herself and looked around until she spotted Naruto. She growled a bit and glared. "What are you?" she demanded with as much authority she could muster. Naruto winced at the reminder of his prisoner and pretended to look confused. "What do you mean, what am I?" Mocha narrowed her eyes. "I mean, what kind of monster are you?" Kokoa's and Naruto's eyes widened. Both for different reasons. Kokoa's eyes widened due to the fact that her sister was wondering what he was. Normally, she wouldn't care. However, Naruto's eyes widened for the fact that Mocha called him a monster. Did she know about Kyuubi? He felt a bit betrayed, but he kind of expected that. "I am human," he replied solemnly. "I'm no monster." Mocha heard his voice but didn't waver. However, she saw his face and she almost felt guilty. The look in his eyes were almost haunted. He was filled with a lot of loneliness. "I want to know what kind of monster you are, whoever you are. I know that humans don't have this kind of strength." Naruto took a step back. He really didn't know what to do now. But when he heard how she said the word human, he grew a tiny bit suspicious. "What do you mean?" Mocha was getting agitated. She started to walk towards Naruto until she was a few inches away from his face. Naruto tried hard not blush at how close she was, but found it hard. He grew nervous and felt self-consciously warm at the moment. What are you doing?" he asked. Mocha continued to look at him until she finally asked, "Since you won't tell me what you are, you might as well tell me who you are." She was about to back away from him but found something hit her nostrils pretty hard. She smelled the air and found the smell intoxicating. She gave a few more sniffs before she felt drawn to the scent of crimson liquid coming from the boy in front of her. She didn't realize Naruto grinned at her when she asked her that question. When Mocha finally found the scent on Naruto's lower lip, she drew a bit closer to him than usual. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm going hey. What are you?" Mocha finally stopped at the sight of the blood, not even realizing what she's doing, and licked it. She licked it once and drew her tongue back to her as though to taste the blood. "Ne-sama, what are you doing?" Mocha ignored her sister and found her tongue at the blood again. This time, however, tracing the blood all the way up until her tongue tasted something soft and bit on it, suckling gently. Her bearings finally returned and she saw blue eyes looking at her wide-eyed. She looked down and found her tongue still attached to Naruto's lips. And right in between, too. She blushed, immediately took her tongue backed a few inches away, and turned her head to hide her embarrassment. She realized what she did and couldn't help but blush harder. I revealed my existence and touched his lips with my TT tongue. Is that a KK kiss? My first K kiss? She blushed even harder, one for her stutter and the other to her thoughts. Naruto, though, was surprised, confused, and happy. He traced a hand subconsciously at the spot where Mocha had bit him and her tongue touched his lips. What was that? He felt giddy. He felt good. He felt alive. What's wrong with me? He finally found his voice to ask. Mocha why did you do that? Mocha turned to face him and turned away shyly. Naruto looked even more confused. Sure, he was blushing, but Mocha's attitude confused him, too much now. But he did hear her mumble a few words that he didn't catch. What was that? Mocha turned to look back at him. Vampire, she mumbled. What? I'm a vampire. Naruto looked at her blankly. He was going to call B*LLS*T, but he remembered a few things that made him stop. The word human came to mind. The power that she showed, but that could have been anything. However, he remembered her looking at his face when, the blood. Really? Mocha nodded a little. Naruto turned his attention to Kokoa, who was just looking at the scene with a, "what the FK," expression. Is she a vampire, too? Mocha nodded again. Naruto opened his mouth and Mocha closed her eyes a little. She already knew the answer. He was going to run away and call for help. He was going to try and kill them. He was going to call her names until they left. She knew it. Her mother and father told her that. She had no reason not to believe them. But she didn't, for some reason, have the heart to hear his answer. For some reason, when she thought about his possible answers, she felt the need to run away. But why? That's awesome. Mocha snapped her eyes in shock. What? Naruto had stars in his eyes. So, you guys are super strong, awesome, cool-looking vampires? Mocha and Kokoa nodded slowly. Both, too, shocked to even register everything he was saying by now. After a few minutes of him talking, Mocha and Kokoa got over their shock. So, you aren't afraid? Naruto shook his head. Nope. Why should I? He grinned. Besides, I can brag that I beat a vampire. Mocha growled at him. So, she huffed. Besides, I think you only beat me because you have an even stronger monster blood in you. Naruto stood still. He recalled a few moments back when she said that to him. At first he felt hurt, but now with the revelation, he understood. A smile came to his face. I'm human. What? But how can you be human when you're so strong, Ni-sama? Naruto did a double take on Kokoa when she called him Ni-sama. He chuckled, it felt nice, but didn't answer. However, Mocha was a different matter. What? I lost to a human? Naruto's smile grew larger and more real. Yep. Mocha growled again while Kokoa admired Naruto. And guess what, Mocha-chan? What? This time she stuttered at the chan suffix. You're friends with one, too. Mocha and Kokoa finally stepped out of the portal. They both were excited. This time, however, Mocha was more excited than Kokoa. She felt attached to her new friend. Her first friend actually. She felt a connection. An individual connection. The only problem though would be how her mother and father would react. She thought about it and frowned as she realized that they would probably take it negatively. In fact, she had a feeling her father would start a war when he found out a human defiled his daughters. She shook her head and looked at her half-sister. She looked excited and looked ready to tell mother and father about her newfound Ni-sama. Mocha had other plans though. Kokoa, she spoke lowly. She felt her parents leaving the castle already. She could feel their power coming already, too. Don't tell mother and father about Naruto. I don't think they'll like him very much. Kokoa looked confused and a bit upset. But why Ni-sama? Because I think father and mother hate humans. I don't want them to hate our new friend, alright? Kokoa looked downhearted but nodded. Okay. Just then, Issa and Akasha arrived. Both looking worried and pale as ever. They found their older sister there trailing behind them as well. Mocha, Kokoa, where have you been? Kokoa and Mocha looked at each other then at their parents. They flinched a bit at their stares and replied. Hello Ka-sama. Odo-sama. We're very sorry for being so late, but we got a little sidetracked while we were fighting, Mocha explained nervously. Issa scowled and it deepened while her mother frowned. Very well, I shall let it pass this one time. Should you do this again you both will be grounded for a month if not more, her father, Issa Shuzan, said. You should not make us worry like that. She nodded in understanding, but was inwardly dancing since her papa or mama had not smelled Naruto's scent. By the way, what is that horrible smell on you? It smells like human and ramen? Issa asked, narrowing his eyes in suspicion. Kokoa looked at her sister in horror, knowing what her papa would do to Ni-sama if he found out about him. Especially if he found out Ni-sama was able to beat Ne-sama in combat. Neither Mocha nor Kokoa could come up with a suitable response. Oh, let them be dear, their mother, Akasha Bloodriver, said. I'm sure they just happened to upon a few humans while training. There are humans on the other side of the portal after all. Alright, I'll let it slide this time, but I want both of you in the shower to get rid of that horrible stench, Issa told them sternly. Oh, and go tell Kahlua that you're back. You know how she worries about the two of you. She was nearly in tears and I do not want to have to replace some of my servants at the moment. Hi Oto-sama, the sisters said, bowing before running to the mansion to take a shower. An hour later the two sisters were ready for bed. Can I sleep with you tonight, Ne-sama? Mocha sighed, knowing that when Kokoa asked this it meant that even if she said no, she would just sneak in. Fine, but tonight only. Kokoa jumped for joy and hugged her big sis before pulling the two of them to Mocha's room. Mocha would have yelled at her little sister, but her thoughts were more than a little preoccupied with another person. Hint, the person had blonde hair. The more she thought about him, the more she blushed. Sure, he was crass and unrefined, but he was also really strong and kind. Not to mention cute. Stop thinking that stupid. Mocha berated herself, not noticing Kokoa trying to get her attention. "Ne-sama!" Kokoa screamed finally. "What?" Mocha yelped angrily since Kokoa screamed right in her ear. "I've been trying to get your attention for the last 5 minutes, Kokoa said, pouting. "What ya thinking about?" Nothing. Mocha denied a little too fast as her face lighted up. Hee. I bet you were thinking about Ne-sama," Kokoa snickered slightly. "I was not," Mocha denied while blushing. "Yes you were," Kokoa said knowingly before grinning triumphantly. "Ne-sama likes Ne-sama, don't ya? Wha?" Mocha said stupidly before what Kokoa said registered. "Kokoa." Mocha angrily punched Kokoa in the face, sending her flying into the wall with a huge crash. "Good night, Kokoa," she huffed before going to sleep. Kokoa grinned and staggered back to bed, happy that her big sis fell for someone strong like Big Brother rather than some wimp she would always have to protect. And when they got married, Ne-sama would be her real Ne-sama. Naruto woke up the next morning with a huge smile since he somehow knew that Mocha would keep her word and come today. He hurriedly got dressed and rushed out the door only to realize he forgot his forehead protector. Phew, don't want to forget this, Naruto thought as he rushed back out to get his morning ramen. He took his usual seat at Ichiraku's and said, "1 order of miso ramen and make it fast." "I'm in a hurry today." Tucci shot Naruto a questioning look. "Now that's unusual, normally you'd have at least 10 bowls before leaving." "Not today, old man, I made some new friends yesterday and we promised to meet up soon," Naruto said, grinning, and quickly slurped his ramen down. "Glad to see you made some friends," Tucci said happily while taking Naruto's money. "You really deserve them." "Thanks, old man," Naruto said a bit shyly and walking out. Naruto sat under the tree that the three sat under yesterday and wondered what they would do today. "I hope they show up soon. Mocha and I can have a little spar and then maybe I can teach them some ninja techniques." Mocha did want to learn and I bet Chibi-chan would want to as well, Naruto thought before falling asleep. Ironically, Mocha and Kokoa walked out of the portal just a couple of minutes after he started his little nap. Mocha sighed annoyed, he fell asleep. Kokoa grinned a little mischievously. "Why don't we pay Ne-sama back for this?" "How?" Mocha asked, wondering where Kokoa was going with this. "Prank him." Mocha smirked down at her sister. "You know what, Kokoa? I like the way you think sometimes." Little did they know that they were being spied on by some kids who had heard Naruto say he had some new friends. They didn't really know what was wrong with Naruto, but they figured it must be terrible if all of the adults were calling him Demon Child all the time. Quickly, the 4 kids ran back to town to tell the adults that Naruto made some new friends with people who weren't of the village and, in their opinion, actually looked like demons. They remembered the prank Naruto pulled on them the other day, though. Paint should never end up in places like that, and they decided to embellish a bit. "Help, the demon child has made friends with demons and is holding my friends hostage," yelled the oldest boy, one in Naruto's graduating class, looking terrified, but snickering on the inside. He didn't expect the reaction to be as bad as this was. Everyone nearby, civilian and ninja alike, pulled out whatever they could for weapons and charged to where Naruto was last seen heading to. "I knew we should have killed the demon child all along," one of the men yelled. "I knew this would happen if we let him live," another man yelled. Naruto suddenly jerked awake when he heard loud guffaws under him. For some reason he felt a strange sense of vertigo before realizing that someone had tied him up with rope and hung him upside down. Looking down he saw something that made his blood boil. Mocha and Kokoa were laughing so hard they were on their stomachs. They pranked him, the prank king. "Hey, what's the big idea of tying me to the tree upside down?" he shouted. The girls both jumped when they realized Naruto had woken up. Kokoa laughed even harder when she saw the look of indignation on his face while Mocha just smirked at him. "Maybe that will teach you to fall asleep while waiting for someone. I'll have my revenge, you hear me? I'll get you two so bad you won't even know what hit you," Naruto declared as he wiggled out of rope before falling with a thud. "Ow, that freakin' hurt." This only caused a new score of laughter to erupt from the sisters. Naruto was about to pounce at them when all of a sudden he heard a huge roar and saw a lot of villagers charging at him with weapons drawn. Kill the demon child. He has gone too far this time. Naruto froze on the spot, realizing that they were coming for him. It was only when he saw the confused and scared looks from the girls did he realize they could get caught up in this. Mocha, Chibi-chan, get out of here now. Don't look back, don't turn around. Just head straight home. Hurry! Naruto shouted, causing the girls to look at him. Mocha gasped when she saw the look in Naruto's eyes. They showed terror and sadness, but even worse was the resigned look. The demon child is there. One of the women shouted as she saw Naruto standing there with two odd girls, and the mob ran even quicker to catch up to him before he could run. Kill him. Mocha and Kokoa were terrified. They didn't understand why these people were coming after them. What's going on, Naruto? Mocha asked, terrified for Naruto's sake. Don't worry about it, Mocha. Just take Chibi-chan and run back as fast as you can. Don't look back, he demanded while looking at her with a look of sadness that no creature should ever be able to give. Loneliness, abandonment, betrayal and resignation all cluttered together. Mocha nodded as she felt tears prick her eyes. Kokoa didn't want to leave her Ni-sama to those evil humans, but Mocha dragged her with her. She forcefully pushed Kokoa through the gate before going against her better judgment and looked back. Naruto was staring at her sadly with kunai stuck all over his body and huge hole in his stomach. Even so, he grinned at her. I told you not to look back. Mocha watched in horror as Naruto fell to the ground with a great thud, and she was about to go rush to save him when she felt Kokoa pull her. She looked down to see her sister with tears in her eyes as she now pulled her into the portal. She struggled as hard as she could, but Kokoa was always physically stronger than her. It was fun playing with you, Mocha. I really liked you, Naruto whispered, but to Mocha he might as well have shouted it with how hard hit her. She tried to pull herself back through the gate, but Kokoa was holding her down. Naruto, Naruto, Kokoa, let go. I have to go save him. Naruto, Mocha cried out as tears fell from her face. Ni-sama said not to look back. Kokoa cried as she held on to her sister. No, let me go. I can help him. Mocha screamed. I can't. Kokoa whispered in tears. Naruto. Mocha shouted at the top of her lungs, but no matter what she couldn't beat Kokoa off of her. The idea that her first friend, and dare she admit it? Her first love was just killed, struck her harder than she ever thought it would. Mocha fell into a small coma from the trauma the next few days, and no matter what anyone asked, Kokoa stubbornly wouldn't tell them why. She woke up a week later, early in the morning, and went straight to the portal to Naruto's home, but it wouldn't open no matter what she did. She did not know that her mother had seen the state Mocha and Kokoa had come back from that place in and decided that whatever was there was too dangerous for them. The former Dark Lord sealed the portal. It never crossed her mind that Naruto might have survived. She knew wounds and knew that there was no way a human could survive them. Mocha and Kokoa secretly found a tree that resembled the one where they first talked and became friends. Skillfully, they built a small grave for them to mourn to. 2 weeks later, Akua Shuzan, their eldest sister, was brought to the castle. Akasha knew Akua's true motive and thus placed a Rosario seal on Mocha that could only be removed by someone who truly fell in love and cared for her beyond their own life. The Rosario was meant to suppress Mocha's memories of her Shinso blood, and the reason to her mother's disappearance, to help the manufactured personality integrate better without remembering many of the horrors of watching her mother get sliced in half or of Alucard and being sealed along with the Shinso. However, it also suppressed most of Mocha's memories of Naruto. Akasha didn't count on Akua giving up her mission after meeting Mocha, but it was too late to stop herself from being absorbed by Alucard. Mocha was sent to live in modern Japan and go to a human school in the guise of searching for her mother. Her current personality simply would not fit in a vampire household where everyone could kill her easily as well as keep her as far away from Alucard as possible. It broke Isa's heart to do so, but it was necessary. Naruto grew up, or at least he hoped so. He got on the team successfully, making friends or at least comrades of his team: Kakashi, the one-eyed Junin, Sasuke the last loyal Uchiha, Sakura the cheerleader. They fought Zabuza and won, barely. Naruto had to use Kyuubi's Yuki. They fought in the Chunin exams, and survived, barely. Naruto had to use Kyuubi's Yuki. They saved Snow Country from a tyrant, barely. They saved the village hidden in the waterfall. Barely, Naruto had to use Kyuubi's Yuki. Naruto brought back Tsunade. Barely. Naruto and Sasuke fought in the Valley of the End, and survived. Barely. Naruto had to use Kyuubi's Yuki. Naruto had to save Moon Country. Barely. Naruto went on a 3-year training trip, hoping to get strong, but in that 3 years, all he did was barely learning to control a fraction of Kyuubi's Yuki. Naruto saved Gaara. Barely. Naruto had to use Kyuubi's Yuki. Naruto fought the Sky Country ninjas in Ribi, and survived. Barely. Naruto used Kyuubi's Yuki. Naruto brought Sasuke back after a tip-off on meeting Orochimaru from Sasori of the Red Sands. Minus hands after boiling his arms off with the Kyuubi's acidic chakra cloak tails. Then he went from 2 tails to 6 tails and went berserk, stomping a mud hole in Orochimaru's ass. Orochimaru didn't survive the meeting naturally. Sakura went ape shit on Naruto later, and Naruto was put on probation for unnecessary damage to a clan head of Konoha. He was restricted to missions only within Fire Country. They tried to execute him, but it didn't work. Sasuke was on permanent house arrest and baby-making duty. Didn't work, his salmon couldn't swim upriver after all the experiments. Jiraiya passed away. Naruto trained at Mount Myenbakuzen for Sage Mode. Naruto defeated Pain. Naruto had to use Kyuubi's Yuki. This time he went 8 tails and met his father. 4th Shinobi War broke out. Naruto trained to control Kyuubi and unlocked his sealed hatred form on Turtle Island. Tsunade and many Junin died after suicide bombing by Sasuke. Madara had sneaked in, told Sasuke what really happened during the Uchiha massacre and persuaded him to kill Tsunade and the Konoha Council. Kakashi took over as Rokudame Hokage. Naruto disobeyed orders and went to the front lines and fought Uchiha Madara and his army of immortal freaks. Rampaging and decimating the White Zetsus along with Killer Bee the Hachibi Jinchuriki. Killer Bee sacrificed himself. Naruto lost focus of his sealed hatred form, and went berserk when he learned of Tsunade's death from Madara till all 9 tails came out. 4th Shinobi War ended when Madara died. Omegakure was destroyed along with Iwagakure. Kumogakure lost their Raikage and 60% of their shinobi forces. Iwagakure, Kirigakure, Sanagakure, Konohagakure lost on average 40% of their forces. There was peace. Sort of. A now 17-year-old Naruto Uzumaki, he didn't want to take his father's name, Genin of Konoha, was sitting on his father's head on the Hokage mountain once more. Naruto was disillusioned. Oh, there weren't any more glares or outright hatred, mostly because he could kick their asses from here to Moon Country. But he knew many weren't comfortable around him and many were happy to call him hero when he fought for them. But vilify him as a demon behind his back. After all, humans couldn't be that strong, right? He was the most powerful shinobi alive, the last Jinchuriki, god-damned god among men. He wasn't familiar with most people in the village other than Tuchi and Ayame, the rest of the Konoha 12. He barely spoke to, and they were more than acquaintances, less than friends due to his hectic 5 years. The only people he really developed a bond or at least had a somewhat stable interaction on a regular basis within his shinobi career were Kakashi, Gaara, Killer Bee. Sakura was no longer on the list. Old Man Sandame, Tsunade, Tuchi, Ayame, Jiraiya and Shizune. More than half of the list was dead. The rest had their own lives to build. It was truly ironic sometimes. In his entire life, he had felt loneliness in Konoha. The reasons for it changed, certainly, but it was still there. As the village pariah, he was lonely. As the village idiot, he was lonely. As the village hero, he's still lonely. Being a scapegoat, or being someone truly great, 2 extremes on both ends of the spectrum of normalcy, both brought isolation. Naruto had nobody that could understand him, and besides a very select few, that were still alive at any rate. There wasn't anyone new that was willing to try either. At a solid 5 feet 10, with a lean build wearing his trademark orange clothes, he knew he was an attractive guy, but the power he had earned in barely 5 years made people uncomfortable around him. He knew something would happen and it would happen soon. His existence made other shinobi villages wary since there were no longer any other Jinchuriki and Kage-level shinobi that could match up with him. None that he knew of anyway. Naruto Uzumaki, Namikaze, he added in his own mind. He'd never get used to that. given the moniker Konoha no Susanoo, Konoha's storm god due to his tri-elemental alignment and battle style. Vicious, fast and brutal. First on the battlefield, and then in bingo book pages of every shinobi nation, assigned a sulfur monosulfide ranking in all of them. His father only received this rank in Iwa's bingo book. Named the storm god for his ability to unleash untold amount of destruction on untold number of people, using untold amounts of flashy deadly techniques of wind, water and lightning. The word, untold, became annoying after a while, but this is what his bingo book page said. Naruto stood out and became the center of attention almost anywhere he went. Naruto himself was isolated first because of his burden, and later because he had become a god among men with power and ability so far beyond anyone that he knew, that it became hard for most to see him as a man who was as human as anyone else, and had just as many frailties as any other human. Of course it didn't help that Naruto had problems with unwanted attention on himself. It left a somewhat bitter taste in his mouth, knowing that he strove for acknowledgement for a more than half of his life, and when he had achieved it, he instead found the gentler, in-depth emotional bonds that he had with Gaara and Killer Bee far more satisfying. He knew that love was practically impossible now that he was famous and hounded by fangirls all over the elemental countries. His village council tried to push marriage contracts on him daily for their daughters or themselves or whoever was willing to try and control him, but unable because he stubbornly refused to marry without love. However, he bet his lucky underwear Kakashi would soon break under pressure and some backdoor deals would be done that his Rokudame Hokage couldn't prevent. Even his continued rank of genin was testament to the politicking done. They couldn't allow him even more power. He was probably the only genin with more S ranks under his belt than he had age. It was sad, but he understood as much as he didn't like it. He was famous, he was powerful, and it offended the upper echelons that the power couldn't be controlled. It had been 1.5 years since the end of the war. He'd come back, hoping for a life of peace, just grow up, be a Junin, have a family, make Hokage later down the road of life, because he now understood that being a shinobi wasn't just about flashy skills and recognition and flowery words, especially after seeing the horrors of war. He supposed that meant he had matured some. Chuckling to himself, he continued to just relax on his father's head. A crippled old man walked away from his hideout. He had a cruel gleam in his eyes as he reached the outside. Watching from his vantage point, he could see the village hero sitting up top the Hokage monument, relaxing. That made him a bit angry. Weapons were not supposed to be sunbathing and relaxing. Weapons like the Namikaze boy should be used. Right now, almost all the other major shinobi villages were weak, and they had an ultimate trump card that couldn't be used to conquer said villages. It was most frustrating. The Hokage had been stonewalling his efforts from day one of the end of the war, and even with legal approval, the boy would not bend to his will any longer with his power. That damn boy, he almost snarled. It was hard to get rid of him or even control him 5 years ago. Now it's nearly impossible with the influence and power he wields. We have to get rid of that monstrosity or he could botch up my plans. A man with a cloak and a porcelain mask on walked a bit faster to catch up to the old man. Wait, Danzo-sama, why don't you send him there with the item you got from Jiraiya's corpse, he suggested. The old man ceased his walking when he heard his suggestion. The gleam in his eyes grew, and he grew an evil grin on his face. That is a very good idea. I should have thought of that sooner. He pulled a black orb that had white lighting on the inside moving around like a storm and walked out of his chamber. Danzo didn't really know anything about the small orb other than the fact that it was something like a one-off Kamui, except without needing Kakashi's Mangekyo Sharingan. Now the only problem is getting this to actually hit the brat, then I'll be rid of him. Danzo thought. Well, you certainly changed my opinion of you. A voice disturbed Naruto from his slumber on top of the Hokage monument. Who would have thought that the demon child would be one of the village's greatest heroes? Naruto was going to retort at the demon child comment, but before he could, he noticed something. Call your idiot bodyguards surrounding me out, Danzo. I have no patience for your games. Danzo grinned a bit to himself as he secretly used his other arm to signal 10 other ninjas to surround the blonde hero. In response, Naruto merely raised an eyebrow. Interesting, where's the party? You're aware I could take all 11 of you down pretty easily, right? None of his opponents bothered to reply other than to charge forward, some throwing elemental attacks to distract him. Naruto simply created a swarm of clones to take the hit for him, Unnoticed in the smoke of the attacks, 10 clones faded into the ground. Danzo looked around warily, knowing how the blonde Jinchuriki spammed his clones like it was going out of style as a distraction of sorts. He didn't have to wait long as a clone faded back behind each of his Anbu and the real one behind himself, as if in a synchronized dance. Each of the clones thrust out a wind blade and 10 Anbu simultaneously spurted blood from lethal points. Danzo had been impaled through his stomach, barely ducking a blade through his liver. Naruto simply raised an eyebrow as the cripple in front of him just laughed even as he was impaled on a blade. Suddenly the body phased out as if a genjutsu. Keeping his face blank but inwardly frowning, genjutsus didn't work on him any longer with his connection to natural energy. And he damn well felt the blade pierce real flesh rather than a bunshin, so what was happening? His eyes widened but he jumped forward, avoiding a fire dragon from behind. He didn't bother to reply to the scathing comments on his abilities but rather answered with blasts of wind to distract Danzo. He didn't have to kill the old cripple. He could already feel the battle atop the Hokage mountain drawing other people, and he just had to wait till they were here. A familiar presence made itself known as it jumped beside him. It's been a while, Sakura. Knowing he had backup now, he prepared to go on the offensive when someone thrust an arm into his side. The last thing he saw as black lightning struck him was Sakura's sneering face. As he was sucked into some sort of portal, he let a tear loose. He had hoped that even if she blamed him for Sasuke's death, she would be more reasonable than to stab him in the back. No one saw the tear other than those already present. Danzo stood there, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. He wanted to be sure of Sakura's loyalty and that the blonde monstrosity was truly out of the way. However, on the inside he was already celebrating. Now that my biggest obstacles, the demon, is out of the way, it's time to move on to the next part of the plan. Everyone fan out. Danzo commanded as his Nei jumped to their respective position in the skirmishes to come. It was time to properly take over the weak city that Konoha had become. He felt an unknown power burst through his wards, and it had come through with a method that he had long forgotten. A smile crept up his face and it made him grin a bit. It seems that someone has broken through the barrier. Hee hee hee. The priest in robes with creepy, glowing eyes eerily chuckled. I believe one has. Want me to go get him for you, headmaster? Another responded. He had a bus driver outfit on with a cigar in his mouth. He had the same creepy, glowing eyes as the priest. Yes, I believe that would be a smart idea to bring him to me, bus driver San, so we can have a very long chat, the headmaster replied. His eyes glowed even brighter. The bus driver left the room and went towards the person who had broken through the barrier. He had his creepy glint and an evil smirk to match his sinister walk. Interesting. Someone from Jiraiya's world is here. A vision flashed in his head in the midst of the pain. He had been sitting on the Hokage monument, being cheered on as he ended the war. Team 7 stood beside him. Tsunade and Jiraiya was beaming at him with sake in hand. Oji-san, or the third Hokage, old and frail but the proud look on his face was undeniable, stood behind him. It was a bittersweet scene, and considering he was dead or about to die anyway, it felt fitting. Hey kid, you better wake up or both of us are going to die. What are you talking about, you damn fox? I'm only surrounded by the villagers and they're calling me a hero. There's no way they're going to hurt me. The blonde knew he was just dreaming, but some things were hard to accept. Ha ha ha, you can continue dreaming if we survive. The Kyuubi cackled. Naruto was falling from the sky when he awoke. When he realized he was falling, he screamed. He screamed curses, profanities, and slangs. He was waving his hands in the air as if he was trying to swim, but it didn't help. To make it worse, he didn't like the landscape below. The trees were dead and black. The ground was dead and somewhat black. A building off into the distance was black and looked somewhat haunted. He screamed harder. Then he calmed himself. He remembered he was still a ninja. Well, at least there's a few trees to help soften my fall. He closed his eyes, gritting his teeth for the inevitable pain. Know your place. A voice screamed and a boy was sent flying. A girl with beautiful silver hair and crimson-slit eyes had kicked the boy away from her when she had been released from her Rosario. Outer Mocha had been dosed with a love potion for Sukune by the little witch and had tried to seduce Sukune, going as far as to tell the boy to kiss her thigh. Inner Mocha had rebelled with all she had. Letting this boy touch her was wrong somehow. It felt like she was betraying someone, but she couldn't tell who. It was like a memory that flitted slightly beyond her grasp, teasing her. It was infuriating. The vague feeling of betrayal was also the reason she let Omit drink the blood they needed for sustenance from Sukune. She would never personally suck blood from him. Not if she could help it. Not until she met him again. Who is him? It wasn't that she hated the human, more like indifferent, but the boy was simply so weak. Both in body and mind. His gentleness and kindness was touching, but he was gentle and kind all the time, which meant he was a complete pushover most of the time. And once the novelty of kindness in the monster world wore off, then he simply felt like a simpering toady. Especially when he pulled the Rosario off for all and sundry problems. There was no future there. She fumed as she walked through the forest, occasionally beating up harmless trees to calm herself down. She couldn't put the Rosario back in case the love potion could still influence outer Mocha. Sighing as she calmed her temper, she allowed her knees to buckle and fall to her rump to rest on the floor, her back against the tree. Sitting there alone, she just watched the clouds float by to relax. Strange, she didn't know clouds could scream like that. When he landed, there was a 5 feet crater and most of the trees were knocked over from the explosion he had created from hitting the ground. His body was battered and he was almost unconscious and dazed. His vision was fading in and out when a blurry figure appeared in a corner. Squinting his eyes, he tried to catch this apparition. Tenchi? Then he fainted. Mocha had watched open-eyed as a orange-covered, screaming thing dropped out of the sky in front of her. The impact had nearly blown her away, but she held her ground until the furor calmed down. Scrambling to her feet, she slowly inched forward, now very curious as to what would imitate a falling star. As she approached the groaning figure in the ground, she could barely make out blonde hair and something orange. Something stabbed in her head. The orange and blonde combination was strangely familiar. Using her foot to roll the stranger over, she watched as his eyes opened. The sky-blue eyes shot another stab through her head. She was starting to get dazed from the pain. His voice was raspy and came as though from a dying man. Tenchi? She blushed. She didn't know why she blushed. She fell to her knees, the migraine was getting worse. Unnoticed to her, a mysterious figure, cloaked in a standard traveler's cloak, walked into the crater and picked Naruto up, completely ignoring Mocha, and threw him over his shoulder. Glad to see you're alive from the fall you took, he. Mocha head snapped up at the unfamiliar voice, but before she could voice her protests, the mysterious figure simply disappeared from the crash site with Naruto on his shoulder. She shook her head. Was she hallucinating? She shouldn't stay out so long, it was probably bad to her health. She grimaced as she got to her feet and made her way back to the dorms to rest. Ruby, bind the boy and make sure it is strong enough to ensure he doesn't escape, the man in priest clothing commanded. As you wish, headmaster, she said, bowing before chanting a powerful binding spell. Black vines constricted him to the chair. Once properly bound, the headmaster threw ice-cold water over Naruto. Cold. Naruto shrieked, trying to jump out of his chair, but found he was unable to move. Glad to see you up and alive, boy, came a voice from the corner of the room. Naruto looked around to see 3 people staring at him. One was a girl with long dark brown hair tied in pigtails with light pink bindings. She had light brown eyes to match her hair. She wore a black skirt that went to her knees and had a slit on the side to show off her legs. She was wearing bright red gloves that nearly went all the way to her shoulders, except she had a black sleeve over her right palm to a little past her wrist and was tied down by yellow rope, while her left went straight to her left middle finger and had a black bracelet on her wrist. She was wearing a light pink sleeveless shirt that had black strings crisscrossed around the front until tied around her neck to hold it up. It had a zipper down the middle and was low enough to show a great deal of her breasts, or more specifically her cleavage. Try as he might, Naruto found himself unable to look away until he heard someone clear their throat quite loudly. Quickly he turned toward the man in priest robes and had a cross hanging around his neck. This didn't look like heaven, although he thought he saw an angel earlier. "What's your name?" the man asked. Naruto Uzumaki, Naruto answered as he took stock of his situation, as well as keeping himself from looking freaked out by the man's eyes. "Why the hell did you tie me up, old man?" He tried to break free, a token act, to keep up pretense till he had enough information, and the easiest way to do so was to act according to what people expected of him. Nodding his head at the vines, "And what the hell is this stuff?" "Black vines," the man answered offhandedly. And we couldn't have you just running around the school, now could we? Fine, whatever, Naruto muttered. But, what the hell am I doing here? How did I get here? Where is here anyway? The only thing I can answer is that this is Yokai Academy, a school for monsters, the man said, causing Naruto to stare at him incredulously. We were hoping you could tell us the rest, boy. Naruto almost yelled at him at the boy comment but calmed himself. He huffed. My name's not boy, it's Naruto, and I don't what's going any more than you do. Last I remember is fighting a traitor to my village, and the next thing I know I'm falling out of the sky and waking up with you, Naruto said. You didn't even introduce yourselves yet, ya rude bastards. Oh my, how impolite of me. You can simply call me headmaster, and the man to your left can simply be called bus driver, the headmaster explained eerily as Naruto looked over at the man wearing a brown bus driver suit. The lady to your left is my personal assistant, Ruby. Naruto turned to the girl and unconsciously gave her a small grin. The foxy grins he was used to using no longer worked as he got older. Oh, nice to meet ya. I would bow, but I sort of can't right now. Ruby blushed a little at his smile and smiled back a little. She found his grin infectious. Nice to meet you too. The headmaster cleared his throat to get his attention. Now that introductions are done, let's get back on topic. Naruto rolled his eyes and turned to face the headmaster again. It seems that you have no idea how you got here and most likely have no way of going back. The headmaster paused, his eyes glowing brighter. In that case, I want you to work for me, since it seems you shall be staying here for a while. Nodding along, this was new. It appeared as if the man wanted him to stay. He would play along till he got more information. Conflicting on the inside, he wanted to go back, but it wasn't really top priority. Grimacing, there wasn't really anything to go back to. He remembered Sakura's betrayal. I believe that is not an option since the portal that you fell through has closed and will not reopen without a certain key to open it. The headmaster chuckled. Naruto jumped at this, not literally since he was tied to a chair and couldn't move. Tell me how to get this key, and I'll be out of your way and gone. You won't even remember I was here. Not so fast, boy. It takes 1 to 2 years to make the key, so you will not be going anywhere for a while anyway. The headmaster smiled knowingly behind his robe. Now, about that job. You will be glad to take in now. Won't you, boy? Since I will be personally making the key. Naruto could tell that he was smirking. Naruto's dropped his head, hiding his eyes as if to appear downcast, and discreetly observed the occupants of the room. He had played along to make it seem as if he really wanted to go back. That way he could have that option open if he really wanted. Deciding his next course of action, he felt like some intimidation should suffice. Being seen as a little boy and getting underestimated was useful but getting tiresome. The last person that underestimated him this badly turned into sushi. Poor Kisame. Alright, but I expect to be paid. Naruto paused, flexing his muscles, and broke the vines easily before he disappeared. Him and a clone appeared behind the two glowing eye freaks with a kunai to their neck, his face now blank and unemotional. Do not betray me. I will follow your advice, but I will not follow orders I think unreasonable, and I do not take lightly to people trying to threaten me. His voice was cold, bordering on freezing. The power that was obvious caused the other three that were present to shiver unconsciously. Suddenly his blank face disappeared and he gave another grin. You happen to have ramen by any chance? Headmaster nodded carefully, aware of the blade at his neck. Okay, then. I want free ramen as well. Deal. The headmaster's eyes became even creepier than before since Naruto agreed to the job. What are the details of the job? Spying? Assassination? Bodyguard? As a ninja of the village hidden in the leaves, I can't do much more than that, Naruto explained as he put the kunai back into his pouch and dispelled the clone. A ninja, you say? That makes this so much easier. I want you to guard a boy by the name of Sukune Iono. Also, I need you to watch over the school for me to make sure no small incidents happen. I'll even give you the best room we have here, the headmaster offered. Sounds easy enough. Just make sure there is enough ramen supplied in there to last my entire stay, Naruto said, agreeing. Looks like we have a deal then. Ruby, show him his way to his room, the headmaster commanded. Ruby quickly bowed and said, I'm sorry for tying you up, Uzumaki-san, but it was the headmaster's orders. No problem, Ruby, as long as you call me Naruto. I hate formalities, Naruto said, flashing her another quiet smile. Ruby blushed once again at his smile. It seemed so mysterious yet belied his confidence and strength, but carried on. Well Naruto, if you will follow me then I'll show you to your room. Naruto followed her out of the room. The bus driver closed the door behind them before turning to the headmaster and asking, "Do you really think it wise to leave the safety of the school to a brat like that?" The headmaster smirked, "Let's just say that I have a hunch he will do well." The bus driver looked puzzled, but didn't bother to wait for the headmaster to elaborate. "Should it really take you that long to locate the boy's home though?" "I might have exaggerated a little," the headmaster said as he pulled out a black orb with a miniature white lightning storm in it. "Hey Ruby, don't those two give you the creeps just looking at them?" Naruto asked as they walked towards the dorms. At first they did, she admitted, blushing as they entered the dorms and started up the stairs. "I kind of got used to it after a while." They walked all the way up to the roof where a smaller building covering half of the dorms stood. Ruby pulled out the key and unlocked the door. "After you Ruby," Naruto said, gesturing towards the door and bowing slightly. She nodded and went in while he followed close behind. The first room they walked into was the living room. It had a nice moderate television that was connected to the human world. Although Naruto had no idea, on the south wall with a nice black couch with a glass table standing opposite of it. On the west wall was a large bookshelf obviously meant for his school books. The room was a nice beige color with a beige carpet. The east side of the room led to the kitchen was a light blue and white color with beige tiling. There was a stove, sink, fridge, a kitchen table, dishwasher, nice wooden counters and beautiful wooden cupboards filled with plates, bowls and cups. The counters had drawers to keep things like knives, forks and spoons. There was also a microwave on one of the counters with an electronic can opener. In one of the pantry cupboards was one of the most beautiful sights he had ever seen, a cupboard filled to the brim with ramen. Some flavors he even never heard of. Just looking it made his mouth water, but he knew he had to wait. So, with a sigh he closed the cupboard. Ruby giggled when she saw him look disheartened at having to leave the ramen. "You really love ramen, don't you Naruto?" "Yeah, you see back in my home world I wasn't liked very much when I was a kid and no one would sell food to me or would triple their prices. Everyone except two people cared enough and were the first to be nice and feed me. The two of them run their very own ramen stand and would sell to me without overcharging. Next to old man Hokage, they were my first precious people," Naruto said with a soft smile that caused Ruby to blush and be a bit surprised that he could be so deep. "I've kind of gotten addicted since then. Tsunade Baan, the leader of my village, actually threatened to forcibly retire me if I didn't start eating other foods." Ruby chuckled as she pictured such a scene. "Why am I not surprised? I think it's time we got back to checking out the rooms though." Naruto just nodded. To the left of the kitchen was a hall which had a door on each side. On the left door was the master bedroom. It was light blue and had a dark blue carpet. It had a king-size bed on the right corner of the room. In front of the bed was a slightly smaller television set. On the left side there was a desk with a computer that was only a couple years old with a color printer and small copy machine. The desk was big enough to write papers by hand and had a small table lamp. There was a small nightstand by the bed and a dresser next to the small table that the television was set on. A slightly larger than average closet was next to the desk. On the other side of the hall was a small guest room that had a small twin-size bed on the left corner of the room with a small nightstand next to the bed. A dresser was across the bed and an average-sized closet was the right side of the room. This must be the guest room, Naruto thought. The last room was furthest down the hall and it was the bathroom. The walls were a light red with black tiles. It had the standard sink, toilet and shower, obviously styled in a Western way. Noticing the door in the bathroom, he opened it. His eyes widened at the swimming pool. It wasn't Olympic size per se but more than enough for a few people to lounge in it. "Well, that's all of it," Ruby said. "Thanks for all of the help Ruby," Naruto said, smiling kindly to her, causing her to blush again. It was no problem Naruto," Ruby said happily. "It was my job after all. Either way, thank you very much." "You're very welcome, but I need to head back to the headmaster's office now," Ruby said as she headed toward the door. "Oh, I almost forgot. Here is the key to the apartment." She handed him a bronze key. "And you'll be in Nekonomi's class." Naruto nodded in understanding before he realized something. "Ruby, wait, yes Naruto?" she asked just before she stepped out of the room. "Do you need something?" Well, you see, the thing is, I don't really know how to use most of this stuff. Naruto admitted, scratching the back of his embarrassingly, causing Ruby to face fault. Really? She asked incredulously. You don't have any of this stuff where you're from? Some of this stuff, like the microwave, but I have no idea what that black box in the living room is in my room, or that other weird similar looking white box on the desk with all of that stuff connected to it, Naruto explained. Why don't I go make us some tea and explain the TV and computer to you? Ruby said, hurrying to the kitchen. The next hour and a half was an explanation of all the technology that Naruto could find in his apartment, dorm. So, Naruto, Ruby said conversationally. You said you were a ninja, correct? That's right, Naruto puffed up proudly. I'm a ninja to the village hidden in the leaves located in the land of fire. I'm going to be Hokage someday too. Hokage? Ruby questioned, nodding his head at her question. She wouldn't know about his world after all. In my world, the people there are divided more or less into 3 groups: ninjas, samurais and civilians. I was a ninja from the village hidden in the leaves. Every major ninja village has a leader called a Kage, Naruto explained. The village hidden in the leaves has the Hokage. The village hidden in the sand located in the land of wind has the Kage. The village hidden in the clouds located in the land of lightning has the Raikage. The village hidden in the mist located in the land of water has the Mizukage. And the village hidden in the rocks located in the land of earth has the Tsuchikage. The name Kage is given to the most powerful ninja in your village and is the goal that most ninja try to achieve. Wow, that's impressive, and you're saying you're on your way to becoming Hokage? Ruby asked, amazed. You must be really strong. Smiling softly at the non sequitur, sometimes, power and strength isn't everything. The leaders have to be compassionate and understand the people they lead and be able to interact with other villages. Naruto said. As it was, a power struggle in our world resulted in what we now call the Fourth Shinobi War. Really? A war? Ruby asked, her eyes wide. Yeah, like I said, power isn't everything, but a group of people wanted to conquer the world. Cliché reason, right? Both of them chuckled at that. Nonetheless, war broke out due to that group. The war just ended a year or so ago at the cost of many lives. Wow, that must be difficult for you, Ruby said sympathetically. Yeah, but it was alright, I guess. I mean, many others survived. There was new peace as we tried to rebuild our lives. Mostly I learned that wars and conflict will always exist. Peace will exist only through tolerance, or rather after many years of persecution when everyone got tired of dying. In fact, based on my perception of your academy, it is a testament to that statement. You avoid humans because you know if they found out about your existence, they would persecute you. Coexistence and peace wouldn't be a popular concept until after years of persecution. So to avoid that, your academy teaches how to tolerate, right? Wow, and you're just 17? Ruby D, amazed at the depth of the person in front of her. Chuckling at her expression, he nodded. That's really amazing, Ruby said, awed. Her expression dropped. You know, my master before I came here was consumed with revenge too. And so was I, and we nearly went to war with humans. What for? My parents were killed in accident by a drunk human, and I hated them for it. I was willing to kill all humans until I met Sukune and the rest of the club he's in. They showed me that no matter what or who you are, you can live peacefully together, Ruby said, smiling. They convinced me, but my master wasn't convinced until just before she died that revenge doesn't help anyone. Naruto laughed. Tolerance of the status quo is important, but some people just won't get the message unless we literally beat the concept into their faces. It's unavoidable. I sincerely hope that you have better luck in the future than I did with convincing my master, Ruby said, finishing her tea and bowing. Thank you for having me, but I really must be going. No doubt the headmaster is going to be furious with how long I've taken, and I'm sure many things will happen to me because of it. See ya, Ruby, thanks for the help and take care, Naruto said, showing her out. Time for dinner. Naruto cheered once Ruby left, pulling out a soba noodle ramen out. Still a 3-minute wait? Damn it, no matter how different things are here, this accursed waiting time has to be the same. Damn you God, damn you to hell. There was a part of inner Mocha's heart that ached after that encounter with the blonde. It was something that hurt because it was something she thought she'd never forget. It was her first love, first friend, and first time she'd ever tasted blood out of someone. She never had the pleasure of sucking his blood directly, but she vaguely remembered his taste. It was so sweet and rich, full of life and full of happiness. Naruto, that was the name of her first. She just recently remembered him. It was weird at first, pieces of the memories that just suddenly, one by one, bombarded her mind in her dreams, slight impressions of smell and touch after inner Mocha went to bed. Outer Mocha didn't know what to think. At first she thought that these fractured visions were just that. But why of a blonde-haired kid named Naruto? What happened to Sukune? She wondered. The only answer she received was the soft, yet guilty, voice of her other self. She was shocked to the core when she told her that he was Naruto, her first friend. And he was human apparently. She really didn't know about that. She asked her another question. Why? Why did I remember now? The only answer she got was silence. She didn't know what to do. It was as if inner Mocha's feelings and memories had merged with her own. She found her heart no longer beat as fast as it did when Sukune was typically around her, but much more harder and faster when she tried to bring Naruto's face to mind. Could my heart be wavering, she thought. She approached who she thought was her first friend and stopped. Sukune, Mocha began. Mocha-san. Sukune, he repeated in a trance-like voice. Sukune, Mocha finished. Mocha happily dug her fangs into Sukune's neck and sucked his blood off good. Mocha, he screamed. Do you have to suck my blood in the morning? Sukune rubbed his neck as they walked towards their school. Sorry Sukune. It's just I haven't had breakfast yet. Mocha replied shyly as she twirled her thumbs. Its taste is nearly as good as his but simply lacking something, inner Mocha said to her outer, causing the outer Mocha to cringe at a somehow perceived betrayal. Even though it should only be her inner that loved the blonde since she didn't exist yet, she couldn't help but remember how a child barely 12 years old sacrificed himself to save her and her little sister. Just thinking about it made her heart skip a beat and a blush appear on her face. Since the meeting with the falling star, something changed in her as she has felt her feelings for Sukune slowly dwindle, but they didn't completely disappear yet as since she's reminded herself that Naruto was dead and she needed to move on. The trauma of his death had subconsciously caused her to have an immediate aversion to humans even through the memory block, but she doubted Naruto would want her to hate them. He didn't seem like the type. Yahoo Sukune tilde. A blue-haired buxom named Kurumu Kurono yelled as she pulled his face into her ridiculously large chest. Good morning Kurumu, Sukune greeted as he tried to escape her hold. Can't you stop that already Kurumu? Mocha sighed as she tried to pry Kurumu off Sukune. Internally she rationalized that if Sukune really didn't like the clingy succubus he would have done something himself rather than just laugh sheepishly. It didn't escape Kurumu that Mocha's reaction wasn't quite as forceful as it used to be. It was a good sign. If she grew tired of the fights she might give up on her destined one. She would have been more gleeful if a bath pan didn't crash onto her head. What did you do that for, ya flat-chested witch? Kurumu asked, rubbing the bump on her forehead and glaring at the young girl. Reaping what you sow, you oversized cow. A little girl wearing a cape and witch's hate by the name of Yukari Sendo said, smirking. Kurumu grabbed Sukune's arm and held between her breasts, but before she could make some remark a kunai made of ice struck her in the forehead, followed up by another bath pan hitting her in the head, causing her to fall on her butt. A purple-haired girl sucking on a lollipop by the name of Mizore Shirayuki popped out of a bush and stalked up to Sukune, and grabbed his waist, forcing him to her. Good morning Mizore. Sukune still freaked out by her always popping up in random places. Good morning Sukune. Mizore whispered into his ear, causing an involuntary shiver to erupt as her breath tickled his ear. This pissed off the other girls, and so they attacked each other in their normal fights in jealous rage, ice kunai and bath pans and all. Now girls, can't we just continue the trek to school? Sukune asked, trying to stop the fight. Naruto woke up early at 5 a.m. to continue his morning regiment. Weights and laps, push-ups and sit-ups before he had ramen for breakfast with some eggs and milk. He would forego the whole thing, but at the very least he would have to maintain his current level of ability. It would not do to be weak if he returned to Konoha. Picking up his customized uniform, a black version of the uniform with an orange tie, he put it on before stretching till his joints popped and got ready. As the blonde walked down the path with a grin that made all the girls blush and swoon at the sight of him, and all of the boys glared, with his black jacket propped on his shoulder, the white shirt he had on open at the collar and slack orange tie. He wasn't really smiling at anything, more like this was the first time he was so peaceful in the morning. No rogue assassinations, no mission calls at 3 a.m., no pink banshee. As he watched the sun and clouds, on his way to the school he failed to notice the weak killing intent that didn't even register on his radar. The glares from the boys came because it was bad enough that Sukune bastard managed to get the 3 hottest girls, and the one for those with little girl fetishes, to fight over him. They didn't need competition like this guy. Naruto didn't even bat an eye at them. The girls stopped fighting as soon as they saw him. His uniform made him stand out quite a bit, and somehow he had managed to make Orange look hot. "Who is that?" Kurumu asked, staring wide-eyed at the amazingly good-looking boy. "I've never seen him before," Yukari replies. "Have you ever seen him, Sukune? Around the dorms maybe?" He shook his head no, and looked at Mizore and Mocha. Mizore immediately shook as well. Mocha however had a puzzled look on her face. "I think I've seen him somewhere before, but I just can't place it. I wish I got a better look at his face." Her train of thought was ruined however when a voice from behind asked, "Wimpy sis?" She looked behind her to see her younger sister and asks, "Yes, Kokoa?" Kokoa looks at her sister, opens her mouth, closes it and walks away. "We're still having difficulty opening up to each other since I developed this outer persona," Mocha thought sadly. The bell rang anyway, and so they put the mysterious boy and Kokoa out of their minds and headed to class. In class, the group sat in the back of the room next to the window. Sukune sat right next to the window with Yukari sitting behind him and Mocha in front. Kurumu sat next to him and Mizore sat behind her. They were chatting about what they should put in their next newspaper issue when the tardy bell rang. All of the students reflexively quieted down when Nekonomiya-sensei walked in the classroom, and started to take roll call. Once that was done she said, "Now if you would open your textbooks to chapter 6. The students were about grown when a knock at door interrupted Nekonomiya-sensei's lecture. "Ah, that's right, I totally forgot. Silly me." Nekonomiya-sensei tapped her forehead and her tail suddenly appeared wagging in embarrassment. "Today class, we have a new student joining us." The class immediately broke out into whispers. "I wonder who it is," one whispered. "I don't give a damn as long as it's some hot girl," another whispered, giggling perversely. "Maybe it's that boy from this morning," a girl said wistfully. "I hope so. He was hot." Another girl giggled and drooled. "Quiet down everyone, quiet down," Nekonomiya-sensei said, catching everyone's attention. "You can come in now." Naruto slid the door open and walked in with a small smirk. The boys groaned since he was obviously not a girl, while the girls giggled at getting their wish. "Please introduce yourself," Nekonomiya-sensei said kindly. "The name's Naruto Uzumaki, good to be here." The small smirk, his slouched stance that belied the lean muscles that strained his white shirt combined with the piercing intensity of his blue eyes that caused nearly all of the girls to blush. Naruto simply raised an amused eyebrow at the class's antics. Suddenly a loud thud was heard, causing everyone to look back. Mocha had dropped her textbook on the floor. She was staring wide-eyed at Naruto, as if she was seeing a ghost. Shaking, she stood up and walked briskly to Naruto. Without warning she grabbed his hand as if she expected her hand to pass through him. "Why, you're real," she whispered wide-eyed. Thoughts, expressions and many full memories of him, his blood, her tongue on his lips and the like were flowing through Mocha's head by now as if unlocked by his presence. Was this the reason why she remembered him now? "Of course I'm real, why wouldn't I be?" Naruto asked, confused, wondering what was up with this pink-haired girl. "Why, you see him too, right?" Just to make sure, Mocha asked Nekonomiya-sensei, promptly ignoring Naruto's question. "He actually said his name was Naruto Uzumaki, didn't he?" "Anyo? Well, yes?" Nekonomiya-sensei agreed, worried about her favorite student's reaction. That was all Mocha needed to hear as she suddenly burst into tears. But she did something that shocked everyone. She slapped the blonde before jumping on him and started to hug him as hard as she could. She could almost feel her inner self gasp and tremble as well. "Why, you're real," Mocha cried on his shoulder. "You're alive. I thought I would never see you again." The entire class was puzzled. They've never seen the #1 beauty of the school, Mocha Akayashi, act this way with anyone but Sukune Iono. The boys could not stop glaring that new kid got to hug the vampire goddess, while the girls glared at Mocha because she already had Sukune and they wanted the new guy. Sukune looked on, puzzled and jealous. Whoever this boy is, was obvious that he was important to Mocha. Yukari was glaring at the boy because he could ruin her plan of a three-way with herself, Sukune and Mocha. or a four-way if she could get Ruby to join. Kurumu and Mizore were smirking, both thinking, yes. Mocha obviously likes this boy, which means the biggest competition for Sukune is out of the way. Now's my chance. The two started to giggle evilly and then glared at each other, knowing they still had to beat each other. Yukari wasn't really considered competition in their opinion. Mocha continued to cry on his shoulder, soaking his jacket, completely missing the tension going on in the background. He's alive. I thought I would never see him again. But what if he doesn't like me anymore? What about Sukune? How can I choose Naruto over him? Isn't my true love supposed to be the only one who can pull my Rosario off? Does that mean that I'm meant to be with Sukune and not Naruto? What am I supposed to do? Naruto blushed as he felt her breasts press against his chest and saw everyone staring with obvious jealousy. He felt awkward as well, and that didn't help. Add to the fact that the girl said she knows him, and he didn't made him feel tad bit guilty. Excuse me, but do I know you? Mocha's eyes widened when she realized that. Then, she felt like slapping herself. Naruto only knew her as her true form and not her sealed form. She jumped back embarrassed. I'm Mocha Akayashi. She blushed and twirled her thumbs around each other, hoping he hadn't forgotten her. I know I've heard that name before, think? Naruto scratched his chin in thought as he tried to remember. Who are you guys? I've never seen you guys on the village before. Are you two new? The name's Mocha Akashiya. Mocha. Oh, I remember you now. He exclaimed, looking at her puzzled. He was confused though, both her hair and eyes were the wrong color and she seemed nicer? No, kinder than the regal arrogant girl he met around 3 years ago. He couldn't help but notice that she was still beautiful, but in a more Hinata Hyuga-like way, despite her looking like a better-looking Sakura. Then he fainted at the stress of a new world, long missing friends, and childhood crushes rubbing their good figures on him earlier. Mocha eeped as he fell on her, collapsing to her knees as she strained to support his weight. The class simply stared at the unconscious boy crumpled on the floor. Disbelief was apparent everywhere. Then the girls noticed that Mocha was hugging the unconscious boy and let the anger flow. Mocha looked around. She could almost see the bloodlust radiating around the classroom by now. Everybody was jealous. For now, the only thing she wanted to do was talk and to get some answer. Her other self demanded that she gets it. Miss Nekonome shuddered, trying to hold off her own laughter from the event. Then she took a deep breath and sighed. Mocha, since you seem to already know Naruto, would you be so kind as to take him to the infirmary and prevent bloodshed? Mocha looked at the teacher with a huge smile on her face. Hi. Could I have Sukune help me though? Sure. Sukune, could you help Mocha take Naruto to the infirmary? Miss Nekonome asked. Sukune got from his seat, still with a sour expression his face. He walked up to where Mocha and Naruto were at the front of the class, and grabbed one of Naruto's arms, and slung it over his shoulder. Mocha did the same with the other arm, slinging it over her shoulder. They took Naruto out of the classroom and headed toward the infirmary. Kurumu and Mizore looked at each other but couldn't do anything since it was still class time. Yukari was practically bouncing in her seat with anger. The class just wondered what happened. Mocha noticed that Sukune had a sad expression and asked with a worried look in her eyes. What's wrong, Sukune? He noticed the worried look in her eyes and said, Oh, nothing, just forgot to study for a test that's coming up. Was the only excuse he could think of. She just nodded. I'm sure Yukari would be happy to help you. She offered to help you the last time as well, didn't she? And turned to look at Naruto again. This caused Sukune to feel even more jealous with a pain in his chest, since she was more worried about Naruto than him. Before this she would insist that she helped him herself. He shook it off and made a fake smile, hoping she wouldn't notice. They opened the door to the infirmary and walked in, closing the door behind them. The nurse was not in the office, so they laid Naruto into one of the beds. Hey Sukune, could you take my Rosario for me? She asked in a pleading tone. Sukune looks at her with doubt. He didn't really want to, considering they weren't in danger and it obviously had something to do with Naruto, but seeing that she was really desperate to get it taken off, he sighs. Okay, Mocha-chan. He walks up to her and pulls the Rosario off. A huge demonic aura flooded the room as the pink-haired vampire's hair turned silver and eyes bloody red. Her already feminine figure went from cute and pretty to drop dead. Why? Nice to see you again, Sukune. Mocha said, sparing a glance at the human. Nice to see you too, Mocha-san. Sukune said. "Sukune, could you leave now? I want to talk to Naruto alone," she said. Her tone was even and unchanged, but there was a clear dismissal in her voice. Hesitatingly but knowing he had no choice, Sukune glances at Naruto and back to Mocha before giving her a worried look. Nonetheless, he had no choice other than to walk out the door, leaving the rosario on the nurse's desk. Mocha watched the sleeping man in front of her, trailing her finger along his jawline, and snickered at his peaceful expression before hardening her eyes at the perceived pain the blonde had put her through. At the thought of that, she did what anyone would do when they met their dead first love. She punched Naruto right in the face, causing the bed to break. The slap before didn't count, that was outer Mocha, now it was her turn. She just smirked at the newly awakened Naruto rolling around grabbing his face. "What did you do that for? That slap was bad enough," he groaned. Mocha smirked. "That is 1 year's worth of payback for making me think you were dead all this time. You still owe me another 4 years plus interest." Naruto's eyes softened, looking away from her gaze. "Sorry, it's just I couldn't find a way to go see you after all that mess. And why didn't you come back through the portal to find out yourself?" He looks back at her. This time it was her turn to look away. "I couldn't, for some reason the portal was blocked." Then she stares back at him again, her expression hardening. "I also believe you have some explaining to do as to why there was a mob chasing you while calling you a demon child," she said, demanding an answer. Naruto's eyes saddened and he averted his eyes, wondering if he should tell her or not. He sighed, knowing that she deserved to know what happened. Besides, considering she was a vampire, it probably wouldn't make any difference, but 15 years of conditioning was hard to throw off. He'd almost literally been trained not to reveal anything due to fear of being beaten and to not be attached to anything since he would most likely lose it anyway. But Mocha was different. He choked. When all sudden the door slams open and Kokoa runs in yelling, "Oni-sama." "What happened? I felt your Yuki." Then stops when she sees Naruto. She glares at him and asks with venom in her voice, "Who are you and what are you doing with my Oni-sama?" Mocha sighs and glares at Kokoa, quietly sighing in relief at the distraction. "Yochibi-chan, long time no see. It seems you haven't changed much," Naruto says, grinning and waving to her. Kokoa sends an even worse death glare at Naruto for calling her what she only allowed one person to call her. This caused Naruto to shiver a bit. "Don't you dare call me that, I don't even know you," she hissed. "How cruel, Chibi-chan. How can you forget your ni-sama even if it was only for 2 days?" Naruto says, pouting in mock hurt. A light bulb flickers in her head, remembering. Naruto ni-sama. She chokes out. "Yep, the one and only," he said, grinning at her. Trembling, she looked at Mocha for confirmation and received a subtle nod. I thought you were dead." I mean you were bleeding? There was a hole in your stomach. And a mob was hovering over you," she said, about to cry. "Yeah, right, like anyone could kill me. That right is reserved for Mocha, isn't that right?" Naruto said, winking at Mocha. Mocha couldn't stop the blush before she glared back. "Besides, I beat your sister. Do you really? I think I would die from a few kunai all over my body and a hole in my stomach," he said. This caused Mocha to raise an eyebrow at his statement. She was going to pay him back for that after she got her questions answered. "Now that this little reunion is over, why don't you answer my questions and how you survived?" Mocha said with a grin. Naruto froze, wishing that she had forgotten about that. He decided to start with the easy question than the more difficult ones. He sighed and began his story. Flashback. Naruto lay in a pool of his own blood as the villagers hit him with pitchforks and other tools, even throwing rocks at him. Even a few of the Anbu that were supposed to protect him threw kunai and shuriken at him. Then right when Naruto thought it was the end for him, the Hokage stood over him, blocking the villagers from hurting him anymore. The Hokage was furious. "Why are you attacking this child? Especially you Anbu. How dare you disobey the Hokage's orders and attack instead of protect him?" he yelled. "I shall have stripped you of your rank and be banished from Konoha for this," he said, a little calmer now. One of the men in the mob yells. "But the demon child had kidnapped a few of the children. We had a right to attack him." "Yeah," the mob roars in agreement. "And where are these children that you speak of? I do not see any," the Hokage said. The crowd grew silent and looked around, trying to remember whether they had seen any children other than those that claimed they had seen the demon making friends. Then the boy that started the commotion walks out the crowd with his head looking his feet. I'm sorry, me and my friends only wanted to play a prank on him since our parents told us to stay away from him, that he was dangerous. The boy said in a scared tone. The Hokage's eyes softened and looks at the boy. That does not mean that you should have done it. We shall give you and your friends punishment later, but for now we need to get Naruto's wounds treated. Anbu, bring everyone here to Ibiki and make sure to find them as well as put them in jail for a while. Rabbit, take Naruto to the hospital. At this point Naruto fainted, not able to stand the pain any longer. End flashback. And, they fixed me up good, Naruto explained. Medical ninjutsu is one of the most amazing skills I've ever seen, and only someone with precise chakra control can use it. Practitioners of medical ninjutsu can do stuff I could never even dream of. Well, that answers one question. Mocha was grateful to the old man Hokage. But, that doesn't explain why they called you a demon child. Before any of them knew it, it was lunchtime. However, Naruto didn't pay attention since he was still mentally debating whether he should tell them or not. But, when he going to though, the door opened and Sukune and who he guessed was his friends walked in. Naruto sighed in relief and cried anime tears at his luck, thanking Kami comically. Mocha and Kokoa glared at the group for intruding on their reunion of their long-lost friend. Unfortunately for Naruto, Mocha heard the sigh and glared back at him, letting him know that she didn't care if other people were in the room. She wanted to know, and she wanted to know now. Tell me right now, Naruto Uzumaki, or I will be forced to beat it out of you. Mocha let her demonic aura leak out a bit and caused all of the girls and Sukune to look at him sympathetically, knowing he was about to suffer. This threat backfired though, because she forgot one important thing about Naruto. He loved a challenge. Then let's make a bet. Naruto grinned and Kokoa couldn't help but feel a sense of déjà vu. A bet? Mocha asked with a raised eyebrow, a feeling of nostalgia wash over her. Yeah, we'll have a match, and if I win I'll tell you when I want to. And, when I win you'll tell all of us immediately. Deal. Naruto agreed, causing everyone to look at him in disbelief. Did this kid really think he can beat inner, scary Mocha? Do you really want to fight Mocha-san, Uzumaki-san? Sukune asked, concerned. Even though he was jealous at the history that Naruto apparently had with inner, he couldn't help but be concerned. He personally knew her strength. She's fearsome, he knew. She's a super vampire, you know. Naruto scoffed. I beat her 5 years ago and I'm on whole other level than I was then. Naruto replied confidently, causing Kurumu and Mizore to look at him in doubt. Right, they thought. However, Kurumu had a thought. Are you a super vampire too? Kurumu voiced out her thought. Nope, I'm human. Naruto replied unhesitatingly in a tone that somehow made everyone believe him. No way. Yukari stared at him wide-eyed. There's no way a human can beat Scowy Mocha. It's true, Kokoa confirmed. Ni-sama is really strong. How? Sukune choked. How could a human hope to beat any monster, let alone a super vampire? At Sukune's proclamation, Naruto observed Sukune for a while. His piercing eyes made Sukune more than a little nervous. You're a bit of a wimp, aren't ya, Sukune? Humans can do anything they put their minds to. The only difference is whether they try or not. The blonde already had Sukune pegged down in a glance. Everyone looked at him incredulously, even inner Mocha and Kokoa looked incredulous at that, but the look in his eyes said he was telling the truth. The intense blue made more than one of them squirm. He's a liar. Kurumu yelled. No human can do anything like that. Ni-sama is no liar. He is human, Kokoa said indignantly on Naruto's behalf. He can only do this stuff because he's a ninja. A ninja? Mizore exclaimed with stars in her eyes. He was now her official hero since she used ninja tools, albeit ice version, but either way. Wow, a real-life ninja, Yukari said, fascinated. Naruto rolled his eyes. So y'all ready, Mocha? Naruto asked as he eyed her carefully. Whenever you are. Mocha gestured him to come, in an almost come hither motion. Nodding, do you know somewhere we can have our match without destroying the building? Blushing slightly that she had forgotten they were in the infirmary, Mocha led Naruto and the rest to a clearing outside the building. Mind starting the match, Little Red? Naruto asked casually, and everyone snickered at her apparent nickname. Kokoa glared at Naruto for calling her that nickname in front of her companions. But then she sighed and yelled, begin. Naruto immediately charged while forming a hand sign, shadow clone technique. Everyone but the vampire sisters gasped when 4 other Narutos appeared on the field. But unlike 3 years ago, Mocha was ready for it. As soon as they were in distance she tried to kick them, but 2 of them blocked the kick and poofed, the smoke blocking Mocha's sight of the other 3. One Naruto jumped high into the air while 2 more dashed to the side of Mocha, intending to pincer her. The one in the air seemed to hold out his hands, creating 2 blue orbs. As he came down, Naruto thrust both orbs into Mocha's stomach only for her to dodge and kick the 2 other clones, closing in at her sides at once and simultaneously punching the one in front of her. She was shocked, however, when all of them burst into a cloud of smoke. Rasengan! Naruto yelled suddenly from her side and he pushed the blue orb into Mocha's stomach, causing her to fly into a tree, but she wasn't done yet. Quickly, she pushed herself up and charged faster than he expected her to be able to and kicked him right in the side, sending him flying. She charged after him, trying to follow up, but cursed softly when he disappeared in a cloud of smoke and turned into a log. A log? Yukari asked, confused. It's called the substitution jutsu, Kakoa explained, remembering Naruto explained it to her. It lets him quickly switch places with an inanimate object. Logs usually, to escape from getting hurt. Amazing, Kurumu stared wide-eyed at the log. Mocha was looking around trying to spot where Naruto was hidden until she heard a small poof and looked down to see the log transform into Naruto. Before she could react, he hit her with an uppercut, which snapped her head back, but she managed to block the kick to her stomach and followed up with a punch to his face. Naruto deflected her fist and head-butted her. The headbutt caused her head to snap back, again. Using that to his advantage, he kicked her in her stomach, grabbed her arm, and threw her at the trees where she slammed through them head first. Watching her slowly get to her feet, Naruto narrowed his eyes and smiled slightly at the challenge. Her strength was on par with most Chunin, high Chunin speed. It seemed she really had gotten better. I think we should have trained under him rather than perverted wolf, Kurumu muttered softly to Mizore, who could only nod in agreement. Sukune couldn't help but feel jealous of Naruto's strength. To be human, but be able to stand against inner Mocha is something he couldn't even dream of doing using his ghoul powers. Mocha wouldn't stay down though. She quickly decided to use the environment to her advantage by tossing everything she could get her hands on. Naruto saw the boulders, trees, logs, branches and the occasional brick come flying at him, but he evaded some of them. He only got grazed by a few, but that didn't bother him. He quickly created 2 wind blades on his hands, tired of getting things thrown at him, charging them with wind chakra. Both blades elongated until they were as long as standard katana. Dashing forward, he cut through anything that was flying at him, but just before he was about to reach her, Mocha punched the floor, creating a big boom and a large dust cloud. Distracted by the smokescreen, Naruto was kicked in the stomach, sending him flying into the school building. Pressing her advantage, she charged at him and kicked him in the side, sending him flying into a few trees before he stopped himself by dragging his kunai into the ground to slow him down. Quickly, she ran forward once again and jumped in the air, intent on doing an axe kick only for a clone to appear and block it. She was about to smash through the clone when she realized that Naruto wasn't behind it. Rasengan! A voice yelled when she suddenly felt a swirling force hit her back. She felt herself fly and slam hard enough into the school building to create a crater right above where Naruto hit. Running forward, he intended to throw a straight punch at her face, but she managed to dodge and grab his face. Using the momentum, she slammed his head straight into the ground, causing a crater where Naruto went limp. Is he dead? Yukari asked, fearful that inner Mocha might have overestimated Naruto's strength. Kakoa huffed in her direction. TCH, Ni-sama won't die that easily. Kakoa said with conviction. You've really grown strong, Mocha. A muffled voice came from Naruto, who was lying face down on the ground. But, not strong enough. She felt a kick go straight to her face and the kick sent her flying. In the air, she saw the Naruto smashed into the ground disappear in a puff of smoke while the one that kicked her stood completely unharmed. Strangely though, his eyes were yellow with the pupils elongated into a rectangular shape and were horizontal, almost like a frog or toad's eyes. Around his eyes was what looked like red mascara. What did you do to your eyes? She asked, panting heavily when she landed back into the ground. This is proof that I've entered into Sage mode, Naruto said, not looking the least bit winded. Even his white shirt was unruffled. You should be proud. The last person to face me while I was using this was pounded to bits, but now you've lost. Naruto suddenly phased out. All her instincts warned her to move as Naruto phased back into existence directly below and in front of her, launching a straight kick upwards. Cage Buyo, but Mocha managed to dodge it. Unexpectedly though, she felt a great force on her face that sent her sailing across the grounds. Naruto appeared under her again even in mid-air, delivering a few more devastating punches but refrained from executing the Omid Renge. This was a spar, not outright kick her ass into the ground. How did he do that? Kurumu yelled out, shocked. Mocha had dodged, but it was like she was hit anyway. I don't know, Yukari said, puzzled. It wasn't often she came across something she didn't know, but when she did, it greatly frustrated her. He's amazing, Mizore said, fantasizing him teaching her those techniques to beat up all of her competition and taking Sukune to be her husband. The blonde stood stoically, not moving and waiting for Mocha to recover from the latest combos. I won't lose to you again, Mocha yelled, jumping high to execute her signature axe kick. She smirked when she felt her foot hitting him with a satisfying crunch. Know your place. Naruto didn't even flinch from the hit, however, he formed a larger Rasengan. Didn't I tell you before? Know your own damn place. Great Ball Rasengan. Mocha took the hit head on and was sent flying 10 meters away and crashed into a large crater. Mocha tried to get up, but found her body unresponsive to her current demands. Luckily she was a vampire and would be healed quickly enough. Looks like I win, huh, Mocha? Naruto smirked. She did the only thing she could. Glare. I'll beat you next time, Naruto. Mocha declared. The newspaper club could only stare in shock. This was an unprecedented event. Inner, scary, evil Mocha never lost when she fought at full strength, and yet this human beat her. Even Kokoa was shocked. She knew her big brother was strong, but she also knew her sister had nearly quadrupled her skills since the last time they fought. For her big brother to win, and not even look the least bit tired, was beyond belief. Naruto let out an amused sigh when he saw the stunned faces of his peers. This was just like when he first beat Kiba Inuzuka in the Chunin exams. No one expected to him win, and while it was useful to be underestimated as a brat, it could get rather annoying. You don't need to look so shocked, you know. It makes me almost feel bad for making it look so easy, Naruto chuckled, bringing everyone out their reverie. Sorry, it's just that we've never seen Inner Mocha lose, Yukari squeaked out, hoping he won't kill them all. Yeah, well, I tend to do that, Naruto laughed. But you realize none of you have introduced yourself to me, right? Huh? Yukari said before her eyes widened in realization. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Yukari Sendo. Sukune Iono, Sukune said a bit stiffly. Hiya tilde, I'm Kurumu Kurono, Kurumu said cheerfully. My name's Mizore Shirayuki, Mizore said, taking the lollipop out of her mouth and bowing. Name's Naruto Uzumaki, but you can just call me Naruto. I hate formalities, Naruto said cheerfully. A little help here, Mocha called out, almost mad at being ignored. Huh? Everyone said, turning to the still stuck Inner Mocha. Mocha, I'm sorry, I totally forgot. Naruto yelled before using the body flicker jutsu to appear next to her and pull her out. He cradled her bridal style, and Inner Mocha had to fight down a blush. Smirking at the blush, he lowered her head slightly and whispered into her ear. You do realize when you tried that last kick, you were wearing a skirt? Inner Mocha blushed even harder and huffed, her nose in the air. That was until she smelt the most delicious smell she had ever smelled, something she only smelled a little over 3 years ago, Naruto's blood. With a lick of her lips, she finally brought her lips next to his neck and extended her fangs before biting down much harder than necessary. She whispered back to Naruto with a smug smile. That's payback for beating me. Before she bit him again, softer this time, and continued her meal much to the shock and jealousy of Sukune. Naruto simply chuckled, watching Mocha seem so happy. The rumbling in his chest caused Mocha to snuggle deeper while drinking. Mocha thought, or Inner, didn't care about Sukune though. Even his blood didn't compare to this, and she was on cloud 9 at the moment. Sukune could not stand though the thought of her sucking someone else's blood unless it's him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the rosario that he had taken from the infirmary. He walked over to Naruto and Mocha and brought it up to her. Here you go, Mocha-san, Sukune said, interrupting her moment with Naruto as he handed her the rosario. What's that for? Naruto asked, confused. It's a seal, Mocha explained. My power has grown so potent that I need to wear this rosario in order to mask my power so that monsters won't come attacking me from all over. It also causes me to have another personality, an outer mocha if you will. With that explained, she snapped the rosario back on the chain and transformed back to outer mocha, who passed out in Naruto's arms. This explains so much, Naruto muttered, remembering how different she was back in the classroom. They walked to the dorms with Mocha in Naruto's arms, bridal style. He had carried her to the door when she woke up. He let her down and she blushed deeply and ran into the dorm without a word. He looked at the rest of the group and they just shrugged. The rest of the girls went inside, leaving Sukune and Naruto alone. The two walked back to the dorm without saying a word to each other. Sukune opened his door, walked in and slammed the door shut behind Naruto without saying a word. This pissed Naruto off a bit, but he didn't care because he was exhausted from the day's events. He entered his room and prepared some food while surfing the internet for a while, intent on researching the current world he was in before going straight to his bed, falling asleep right when he hit the pillow. That night he dreamed of silver and pink flashes that melded to form some sort of amethyst color. Naruto's dreams were interrupted by a certain being sealed with him. "Hey brat, wake up!" that QB ordered in his mind. Naruto once again found himself lying in a pool of icy water in his mindscape. The scene was familiar to him as he had visited this place numerous times in his life, usually when he needed to borrow the fox's chakra or when the fox summoned him. He stood up and looked at the cage that had sealed the demonic kitsune for the past 16 years. Inside he could make out the red-orange fur and blood-red eyes of the fox staring back at him. Its face was contorted in annoyance. "About time, Baka. The loudest of ninja could walk right in your room and you would never have noticed until you were dead. You're lucky that I would never let that happen, seeing as if you die, I die." The Kyuubi snarled. Naruto twitched a finger and watched as a giant torii fell down, chaining the giant beast to the floor, and crossed his arms. "Shut up, you damned fox. So what's the reason for you bringing me here? Just to insult me on how I sleep?" he asked sarcastically. The fox growled at his lack of respect. "No, I have summoned you here because I want to congratulate you on finding this place," the fox said as he chuckled in amusement at Naruto's shocked expression, and then he continued. "Back when I was free to roam the world, I had been hunting this place for quite some time. You see, the founders of this school were called the Three Dark Lords and were one of the most annoying pests that I had ever encountered. Individually, I could kill them with no effort, but together, they would have enough power to drive me out. Every time I set foot on their lands, they would sense my presence and see to it that I don't remain there for long. Once I discovered that they had created a school for monsters though, I decided to have some fun. However, after a while of fruitless searching, I never found the place as they had hidden it from mortals and beings of power such as me, and by then Madara had already ensnared me in his genjutsu and I was sealed." He finished. Naruto had listened intently, but that last part of Kyuubi's story made him curious. "If they hid the school from you, then how was I able to get in? Since you are sealed inside of me, shouldn't it be hidden from me too?" "That I am not so sure," the fox admitted, "but one suggestion is that since you are only a Jinchuriki, it was enough to allow you access into the school, but it would be wise not to openly boast about being a Jinchuriki, unless you want bloodshed and destruction, in which case, go ahead. Shout it to the world. I'm 100% supportive." The fox finished with a false puppy-eyed look on his face that made Naruto sweat drop. Naruto nodded. "Alright. Well, is that all you're going to tell me? Yes, you may now go. I have nothing more to say to you." Naruto moaned as he started to feel himself wake up. Slowly sitting up from the bed, he noticed that it was still early, barely 4 a.m. "Damn fox, why couldn't he bother me at a different time?" he thought. Looking at his alarm clock, he groaned when he realized that he had more than 2 hours till class started. Deciding to do some training with the few hours that he had to spare, he quickly got dressed and walked to the academy woods. He stopped in one of the many clearings it had contained and then performed a few familiar hand signs. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Over 200 shadow clones poofed into existence. All of them immediately formed straight lines while the original Naruto went to the front. "Alright you guys, as you know, ever since we've moved here to the academy we've been getting slack. Now relaxing time is over and it's time to continue our training. All of you will fight against me until the last man is standing. I want you all to come at me all out. Standard sparring rules, everything goes except lethal hits. Wait for my signal to start, he commanded. Hi boss, was the collective reply of hundreds of Naruto clones. All of them pulled out kunais and went into battle stances. 2 hours later, Futon Rasengan, shouted the original Naruto as he drove the wind chakra-infused orb into a clone's gut, instantly dispersing him in a cloud of smoke. He looked around, noticing that there were no more clones remaining, but was surprised at the destruction from the fighting they had made. Trees were destroyed or uprooted and craters ranging from small to large were all that was left of the clearing that he had stepped foot in 2 hours ago. After checking the time on his watch, he shunshined back to his apartment so that he could get ready for school. He went through his morning ablutions, he got out of the shower grabbing a towel to dry himself off and put his black uniform back on. After he was finished in the bathroom he looked at a clock and noticed that he still had some time. So he went to the kitchen, grabbed 2 cups of ramen. Then he put them on the table and grabbed the kettle next and filled it with water. Naruto finished eating his ramen and looked at the clock again. It was time for school, so he went to the door and opened it. Outside, Mocha was standing there with her eyes closed, feeling a bit amazed at Naruto's dorm, but also really nervous about seeing Naruto. Summoning all of her courage, she knocked on the door, but strangely enough it felt like flesh and bone. Opening her eyes in confusion, she saw her hand on Naruto's forehead where a red mark had formed from her knocking. She blushed in embarrassment. "Good morning, Mocha," Naruto said, laughing at the look on her face, causing her to blush even more. "Gee, good morning, Naruto. Can I talk to you about something?" she asked shyly, hoping he would agree. "Sure, do you want to come or talk on the way to school?" he asks. "On the way please, I don't want to be late," Mocha replied immediately. Naruto nodded as he stepped out. He locked the door behind him. They were walking down the boys' stairs when Mocha opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. Noticing her discomfort, Naruto grabbed her shoulder and pulled her into an alcove before turning to face her. "Are you okay, Mocha?" Naruto asked, concerned and confused. Mocha looked at her feet. "Do you hate me? Why would I hate you?" Naruto asked, shocked. Well, I'm nothing like my inner self. I'm not strong or confident. I know I'm not as wise as her, and my assets are smaller than hers too," Mocha admitted, twiddling her fingers self-consciously. "Cocoa didn't like me at all because I'm nothing like her. It's alright, Mocha, to me whether you have bigger busts or not as lovely, it doesn't matter. I know here," he places his hand on her forehead, "and here," he pointed at where her heart was, "nothing changed. You are still the same sweet person," Naruto said, smiling as Mocha blushed beet red. "I like you, however, you are simply because you are Mocha." Thank you, Naruto," Mocha said, standing on her tiptoes to give him a small kiss on the cheek. "I can't believe I did that. I thought I liked Sukune, but something about Naruto just mesmerizes me. Oh mother, what am I supposed to do?" Her heart was beating as fast as her face was red by now. "Oh, and it's alright if you want to suck my blood, it won't hurt me, just ask first, okay?" Naruto said to the blushing Mocha as she stared wide-eyed. "Is he really okay with that? Sukune always gets upset when I ask." Mocha thought, looking at him in disbelief. "In fact, you can have some right now if you want," Naruto said as he exposed more of his neck. He stepped forward, they were so close now, causing Mocha to look at him in a daze. She's so close, but decided not to when they heard their friends calling out for them. "Good morning, Mocha-san," Sukune said with false cheerfulness when he saw her walk out of the alcove with Naruto, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Good morning, Uzumaki-san." Sukune was hurt when he saw how close Mocha was walking to Naruto. He noticed when they walked out Mocha seemed to be actively stopping herself from walking closer to Naruto than she should. He couldn't help but hate Naruto a little for this. Compared to Naruto though, he had to admit that he fell short by leaps and bounds. Even Kokoa liked him and called him Naruto ni-sama, and the only other he ever saw get that kind of acknowledgement was inner Mocha. Despite how happy she was that Mocha seemed to be moving on from Sukune to Naruto, Kurumu couldn't help but feel sorry for him. He was feeling what she had been feeling when it seemed like the Sukune and Mocha would end up choosing each other, leaving her without the one she had fallen in love with. She just hoped that Mocha would choose Naruto over Sukune and she could help Sukune move on to her. "Good morning everyone," Naruto and Mocha said in stereo. They looked at each other in perfect unison and giggled. "Good morning," Yukari replied with vigor as she ran up to hug Mocha. She turned to eye Naruto and he couldn't help but suppress a shiver and feel like she was undressing him with her eyes. Eyes that were eerily similar to his old mentor, Jiraiya, whenever they were near any hot springs. "Do you mind not raping me with your eyes in public, broad daylight, right before classes, Orochibi?" Naruto asked, ignoring the glare he got from her for the nickname he gave her. "I'm a child genius," Yukari said with a puff of the chest. "I was allowed in early because I was so smart." "Really? That's amazing," Naruto praised, causing Yukari to beam and blush. "So, is there a, what did that book call them again?" "Oh, yeah, is there a yokai primary school and yokai middle school?" "Nope," Kurumu answered. "Most of us are taught at home or go to the school in the human world." "What about you? Did you go to some ninja school or something?" "Yeah, I did," Naruto said, surprising her since she was joking. "You see, girls, I'm actually from a different dimension, so things there are a bit different than they are here." "Really, how did you get here?" Yukari asked, wide-eyed. I don't rightly know. I was fighting a traitor to my village, when I was blindsided with something that somehow managed to send me here. Next thing I know, I was falling through the sky and tied up by the creepy guy called Headmaster." Mocha stared at him in shock at that, remembering what happened when she was there. "At one point, I thought I died and went to heaven cause I vaguely remembered meeting an angel somewhere, but it was pretty blurry, ha ha ha." At that, Mocha simply flushed and tried to hide her face. She was the angel he met, or rather inner Mocha was. She inwardly squealed in happiness at being called an angel but was too embarrassed to say anything in front of all their friends. Even the Rosario seemed to glow a bit red. "Wow," Sukune said flatly. "So, what school, like where you're from?" Naruto stared at him, wondering what the lukewarm attitude was about before shrugging it off. "Well, there are two schools in my village, the civilian school and the ninja academy. The civilian school is basically to teach kids how to run stores and companies. Stuff like that. The ninja academy, on the other hand, teaches you hand-to-hand combat called taijutsu, how to use and break illusions called genjutsu, and how to use ninja, magic, called ninjutsu. We are taught basic maths and reading as well as how to use shuriken and kunai. We're also taught how to use chakra." "Chakra?" Yukari asked, trying to absorb the information. "The basic energy needed by the body in order to live, but also do the things I did yesterday," Naruto explained. "All of you girls can use chakra since demon aura and chakra go hand in hand. For monsters and demons, you can't use one without the other, but I'm sorry to say that it's too late for you, Sukune. Your chakra coils, where your chakra is stored, is, too, set in stone." Sukune deflated, knowing that he couldn't even get taught those skills by Naruto to help Mocha and the others. "It is possible for you to force chakra in your body using demon aura though, but it would turn you into a monster who can't even distinguish between friend and foe," Naruto said, and Sukune immediately thought of his ghoul powers. "You sound like you've seen that happen before," Sukune said accursedly. "Yes, I have," Naruto stated, but didn't elaborate any further. "What are you hiding, Naruto?" Inner Mocha said to outer Mocha, who looked just as puzzled. "There are other things you can do though," Naruto told the boy. "Anyone can learn walking on trees and water. It's not difficult for already set chakra coils to do. You can develop your muscles and learn taijutsu. My friend Rock Lee did that and he is one of the most powerful ninja in our village." "Wait a second," Kurumu exclaimed suddenly. "Does this mean you know what Sukune really is? You mean that he's human?" Naruto asked, surprising everyone. "Yeah, he was too overreactive to what humans are capable of that you could just tell he knew it from personal experience. His body language screamed, human among monsters. And I already sneaked a look at the headmaster's personal files while negotiating terms, but they don't need to know that." Sukune blushed and was glad that most of the monsters were much more easily fooled than Naruto. Though that might be due to the fact that the girls distract most of them from noticing his scent and the fact most monsters seemed to spend more time staring at the melons beside him rather than at him. The rest of the conversation was cut off as the bell rang. "Last one there has to buy everyone lunch," Naruto declared. "You're on." Kurumu cheers, loving this kind of thing, but started muttering angrily when Naruto disappeared in a puff of smoke. "That's no fair." All of them shout together. Naruto suddenly appeared in the middle of the hallway, causing everyone to jump. He smirked, thinking he can get one of them to pay for his meal despite it being free. Walking backwards, he tried to see if he could see any of the others. Unfortunately, he wasn't paying attention where he was going and didn't notice the foot suddenly stick out in the hallway. Tripping, he fell on his back and Kokoa put her foot on his chest making a V sign with her fingers. What the hell, Chibi-chan? Naruto yelled. Teach me to beat Oni-sama. Kokoa demanded. No, Naruto said immediately. I'm not going to teach you how to hurt Mocha. You don't understand Ni-sama. I need to get stronger so Ne-sama will acknowledge me. Kokoa complained. Naruto paused at that. That was something he could relate with. And, my future dream is to be the greatest Hokage. Then the village will stop disrespecting me and start treating me like I'm somebody. Somebody important. Naruto sighed before standing up, lifting Kokoa up to sit on his shoulders before resuming a walk to her class. Kokoa, I don't pretend to know everything about Mocha, but don't you think she already acknowledges you? After all, you're her sister. She loves you, but she got tired of your constant pushing, so she acts as if she can't be bothered. Wouldn't you act the same way? Kokoa had no reply to that, but Naruto could tell she understood a bit from the way her grip on his hair had tightened. Anyway, I'm kind of busy right now with a job, but I will try to teach you the basics, if you promise me one thing. What is it, Ni-sama? Kokoa's voice was uncharacteristically subdued. I will help you earn strength, if and only if you use that power to protect your Oni-sama. She can't always be strong. By doing that, you will show how much you care for her rather than constantly attack her. I'm not saying you have to stop attacking her, just ask for a spar once in a while, but make sure it stays like a spar between sisters, not a grudge match. Noticing they reached her class, Naruto lifted the small girl he thought of as a little sister down from his shoulders and let her down and kissed her forehead before frowning at her subdued expression. And next time, if you jump someone like that, make sure you're wearing shorts. Why should I? Kokoa's head snapped up, her expression now puzzled. I could see your panties earlier, Tilda, Naruto sing-songed. Wha? Kokoa said blankly before realizing that she was giving him an accidental peep show. A tiny bat flew over to Kokoa, and she squeezed it tightly. Naruto was about to yell at his little sister about animal abuse when the bat magically transformed into a giant mace. Watch where you're looking, you arrow Ni-sama. Kokoa screamed before smashing his face in with the mace. Happily, she does not hit as hard as Sakura. It was an accident, Chibi-chan. Naruto defended as he dodged the second hit. I don't care, Kokoa declared as she missed the next attack and transformed Ko into a great sword. It's bad enough that idiot Sukune is always getting into perverted situations. I don't need my Ni-sama doing it, too. Chuckling, happy that his little sister was now back to her energetic self, he left a clone behind and sunshined near his class. The clone was left cursing to dodge the little vampire's swinging mace in the hallways until the mace slammed its body into the floor. Kokoa, who had been feeling triumphant she had actually hit her Ni-sama, went wide-eyed at the sudden puff of smoke. Ni-sama. Naruto chuckled affectionately at the scream resonating down the hallway. He never had siblings before, and the dynamics he had with Kokoa was comforting for someone that had been alone for a long time. Oh, Naruto, Tilda? A voice called from down the hill. I like melon bread. Naruto looked down the hall and saw Kurumu there giving the universal sign for victory from their classroom. Naruto slapped his forehead, he completely forgot the bet. Damn it, Chibi-chan, you made me lose the race. Hey there guys, looks like I lost the race, Naruto chuckles rubbing the back of his neck. How about we forget all about that tiny little bet? Not a chance, Kurumu said, drooling about all of the breads she'll get to eat today. Naruto cursed under his breath and swore revenge against Kokoa. Giggling evilly he began planning for Kokoa's torture training. Kokoa, who was grumbling about arrow Ni-samas in her class, suddenly shivered. The rest of Naruto's class began backing away at the evilly giggling blonde. Then suddenly it stopped and he looked up to see the rest of class stare at him. What? Receiving no answer he continued to his desk, staring at his frog wallet, trying to memorize the look and feel of it being so full because he knew it would be a long time before he saw it like that again. He took the seat in front of Kurumu and next to Mocha. It'll be alright, Naruto, Mocha said, patting his shoulder sympathetically. But, I do really like ramen. Naruto perked at that. I knew there was a reason I loved you, Mocha. Naruto exclaimed as he hugged her, making her eyes widen and her blush started of a slight pink, a dazed look in her eyes. Are you okay, Mocha? Sukune asked, glaring at the oblivious Naruto. He was counting all the reasons why she would make an excellent wife. Mocha simply got a bit redder with every reason she heard from Naruto. It's nothing, Sukune, she said a bit too hurriedly and not so subtle look at Naruto. Calm down already. He was just reacting to the ramen comment. Don't you remember him telling me that his absolute favorite food was ramen? Inner Mocha scolded. Outer Mocha tried, but she honestly couldn't remember him telling her that. A great deal of her inner's memories can't ever be accessed by her. Only really big ones could. She made a mental note to remember that though. Nekonomiya-sensei walked into the classroom and started the lesson. The morning seemed to drag on and Naruto almost missed the lessons at the Ninja Academy. At least he got to fight there. Thankfully, it was finally lunchtime. Naruto wasn't sure if he could stop himself from jumping out the window just for an excuse to get out of class if it went on any longer. What do you mean I have to pay for my ramen? Naruto yelled furiously. I'm supposed to get them free for my entire stay. The headmaster said you had to pay today, the chef explained, glaring at Naruto. Something about bet and paying for lunch. That creepy bastard. Naruto snarled. He just took advantage of the bet I made with friends. The chef had no sympathy for Naruto and forced him to hand over the expected amount. After paying for all of his friends' meals, which somehow included Mizore despite her not being there this morning, he held up a completely empty wallet. Wow, what a cute wallet, Yukari said, looking at his frog wallet. Where'd you get it? It was my first birthday present, Naruto said, his comically sad expression turned into a soft smile. You see, back where I come from, I'm an orphan. Been that way since I was born, and you can ask Mocha here or Chibi-chan to confirm that I wasn't exactly popular and well liked while growing up. They hated you if that day was any indication. Mocha flinched at the memory that came up again, which caused Sukune to glare at him for making her remember something difficult. That sort of thing only happened 2 or 3 times, and usually they were drunk. I was more ignored completely or glared at than anything else, Naruto said nonchalantly. Anyway, there is this restaurant stand I go to called Ichiraku. The owners, Old Man Tucci and Big Sis Ayame, were always nice to me. On my 9th birthday, they both got me a present. Old Man Tucci got me these green goggles that I wore every day until I got this forehead protector. A symbol that I'm a leaf ninja. While Big Sis Ayame got me this wallet. Actually, it's more of a hand-me-down from some lady named Kushina who apparently got it to remind her of her ninja boyfriend. She was a huge ramen eater and gave the wallet to Ayame to pass down to someone who will put the wallet to good ramen spending use, so she gave it to me. He didn't feel like explaining the connection between him and his mother and so used the original explanation. Much simpler. Such a small object has such a great story, Mizore said quietly in amazement. So, why are you supposed to get free ramen? Kurumu asked with a mouth full of melon bread. That creepy bastard we call headmaster agreed to it in return for services, Naruto explained. Services? Mocha asked. To help protect the school and keep an eye out for the more danger-prone students. Naruto stared blatantly at Sukune, who chuckled awkwardly at the correct accusation. You can definitely do it, Yukari said, remembering his fight with Inner Mocha as the lunch bell rang to indicate it was time to head back to class. Back in class, Ririko-sensei had decided to randomly hold a pop quiz. It went straight over Naruto's head. Trying anyway, he hoped that Mocha, or Orochibi, Yukari's pet name, could help him out in the future. If he was going to be stuck in school, then he wasn't going to be dead last again, damn it. By the end of the quiz, he wished that it was the Chunin exam test again because he could get away with a blank sheet and still pass. Letting out a tired sigh, he waited through the rest of the day only to feel even more stupid as the classes passed on. Naruto looked like to be nearly in tears as they headed towards the school gate. Kami, why? You send me to life and death battles, then you send me to do high school tests? 'Cause Kami loves you. Loves me enough to stick you in my guts permanently anyway. What, you don't like me? How could you? After all we've been through together? Naruto heard what could be classified as fake sobs and gave the fuzzball the equivalent of a deadpan stare before being jolted from his internal argument. Are you okay, Naruto? Mocha asked, especially worried seeing him struggle in class. No, Naruto said despairingly. I'm so far behind that at this rate I'm guaranteed to be the dead last. Please Mocha, Orochibi, help me. I'll do it, Mocha and Yukari said together. Mocha because she wanted to help Naruto, Yukari on the other hand. But only if you tell me more about your dimension, Yukari added. Deal. Naruto cried joyously and hugged the two of them. As Mocha somehow already knows, my dorm is on the roof of the boys' dorm. We can study there. Alright, we'll start tonight, Yukari said cheerfully. At the school gate, Kokoa was trying to bash two Cyclops heads in since they bothered her while she was waiting to see if her big brother had decided how to train her yet. Just stay down, ya one-eyed jerks. Kokoa screamed using her giant hammer to hit them back. Yeah, show them who's boss, Chibi-chan. Naruto cheered, accidentally distracting Kokoa, who took a hard blow to the head. Oi, ya bastard, what did ya do to my little sister? Don't you run away from me. Naruto charged as the Cyclops tried to run away, afraid of the look in his eyes. Reflexively, Sukune went to pull off Mocha's Rosario, but it actually took a few tugs before he could get it free. Mocha dashed up, keeping pace with Naruto. Oh, hey, Mocha, Naruto said, grinning as if they were taking a stroll through the park. Hello Naruto, Mocha said, smiling back before turning back to the running Cyclops. Jumping forward, Mocha kicked one of them, yelling, "Know your place." Naruto followed it up by thrusting a weakened Rasengan at the other one, screaming, "What she said." Both Cyclops were completely knocked out from the hit. Do try and not wake me up for these small fry next time, Sukune. Mocha glared. He didn't even need her help with Naruto here. Sure, she liked talking to Naruto, but she'd prefer to do it without all of the distractions. Quickly she sucked Naruto's blood, reveling in the taste of it. Before he could comment, she put her Rosario back and made sure to pass out in Naruto's arms. Her gentler persona might not have made her decision yet, but that doesn't mean she hasn't yet. So, about that studying arrow, Chibi? Naruto asked, carrying Mocha bridal style. I'll get my older textbooks, she said, dashing back to her dorm as Naruto headed up to his dorm. He didn't see any problem letting Mocha sleep in the master bedroom. He'll take the guest room or the couch if Yukari decided to stay the night. Sukune stood rooted to the spot as he tried to stop the tears from spilling, seeing inner Mocha choosing to fall back asleep in Naruto's arms. He felt a hand placed on each of his shoulders and looked up to see Kurumu and Mizore smiling sadly at him. A voice interrupted the three standing there. Hey guys, wanna come to my room for a while and hang out later this evening? They all look at each other and shrug. Sure, why not, we got some time anyway. Good, make sure to bring your swimsuits too. Naruto says, grinning. Swimsuits? What do we need those for? Kurumu asks. You'll see when you get there. Naruto replies. Now that you mention it, we've never been to your room, have we? Mizore said. Okay, meet you guys at my room around 6, Chibi-chan. Can you help me get your sister's swimsuit later as well? Seeing her nod an affirmative and scamper off, wind and leaves swirled around Naruto and Mocha before they disappeared. I wonder what we need our swimsuits for? Sukune asks. Who knows, let's just bring them anyway. Kurumu replies. The group separates and goes to their rooms to do their own stuff till evening. Wow, this place is so nice, Yukari exclaimed, looking around Naruto's place. It's more like an apartment than a dorm. Naruto felt embarrassed, but didn't show it. One of the perks of being on the headmaster's payroll, Naruto said, still holding a sleeping Mocha. Just take a seat on the couch while I go take Mocha to my bed. Yukari blinked when he said that. Then a thought crossed her mind. Pervert, Yukari screamed, pointing her finger accusingly. Now it was Naruto's turn to blink. What? Naruto exclaimed, confused until he realized what he said. Not like that. I just figured that Mocha would be more comfortable in my bed than the guest room's bed. A glint crossed her eyes. And, then when she's all rested up, you'll quietly but lovingly sneak into her bed, Yukari said, drooling. She wiped the drool quickly and did a poor intimidation of Mocha and Naruto's voice. And Naruto? What are you doing here? Oh, Mocha, I just couldn't stay away, please don't be mad. Mad? Why would I be mad? I've wanted this since the day I've met you. But, what about Sukune? Don't you have feelings for him too? Yes, I'm sorry Naruto, but if you want to be with me, you'll have to share. I hope that's okay. For you Mocha, I'm willing to do anything. Can you go fetch him for me? Of course. Yay. Go get Yukari too while you're at it. The pipsqueak? It's been her dream to join since I've known her and I want to make her happy. I'll go get them while you get ready. And, then Mocha slowly strips down while you go fetch Sukune and I. And we return where you slowly pull off my. Like hell any of that will happen. Naruto interrupted with a yell, face flushed in embarrassment and the thought because it actually crossed his mind, minus Sukune of course. He shook his head to clear his thoughts. What the hell are they teaching you here? Ed? Yukari asked with a grin. Bah, forget it, even if Mocha accepts me. You're not getting anywhere near our bed, Naruto replied, taking the, amazingly, still asleep Mocha to his room, placing her onto his bed, and tucking her in good night, or afternoon. Now how are you going to help me? She cleared her throat. Well, I need to test how far along you are, so I downloaded primary level tests in mathematics, English, Japanese, science, history and monster history from my personal computer. We'll start with math, okay? Actually, Naruto paused. I've got a better idea, Naruto said as he formed a hand sign. Shadow clone jutsu. A puff of smoke erupted. Wow, Yukari said, realizing she forgot that he could clone himself. Are they really real? Yup. The shadow clone jutsu is an A- rank jutsu compared to the clone jutsu, which is a E rank jutsu, Naruto explained. There are different kinds of clones? Yukari asked, interested. She did make him telling her about his dimension in exchange for tutoring him. Yes, the most basic and lowest class is the clone jutsu, which are simply illusions. Then there are the elemental clones, like water clones and lightning clones, which are C rank to B rank clones. They have substance and can have secondary effects depending on the user makes them. The last and most powerful are my specialty, shadow clones. They are created by dividing your chakra equally amongst them, and because they aren't made out of any elements they can't be determined if they are real not by any tracking method. Recently, I've also learned that anything they mentally learned will be shared with me, thus speeding up my learning curve and why I'll be using them in the tutoring process. Amazing, so whatever they learn, you'll know too? Yukari asked, amazed as she decided not to ask anything else for now. If that's the case, then have each one take a test. Actually, the only two I can even hope to know a little about are Japanese and math. Everything else wasn't taught at the academy, so I was thinking that you can tutor me while two of my clones take the tests, Naruto told her, scratching the back of his embarrassed. But, I got to warn ya that I learned best by doing, then hearing some long-winded explanation. Yukari sighed. This will probably be harder than when she tried to tutor Kurumu last year. A couple hours later she decided that she was wrong. Naruto was no star pupil, but if you were patient and let him use his clones he did make amazing progress. She had been tutoring him on basic biology right now, and he was able to keep up with his 20 clones, some of which were sitting on the walls and ceilings. He was nearly at a second grade level in that aspect. It will be a long time before he caught up, but at least he was trying, unlike Kurumu, who basically just complained that she couldn't get it. My clones finished their tests, Naruto informed her. She nodded and decided that they did enough science tonight. Great, then I'll go grade how they, you did. Yukari went to the kitchen, where the clones took the tests. An hour later she came back with a slight frown. Your math skills are only at a 4th grade level, and that's barely. Your Japanese though, it's atrocious. It's quite obvious that you can barely read at all and your handwriting is terrible. That bad, Naruto musked to himself. A second later he said, yeah, I did really learn how to read until I was 14 when my master had me help edit his novels. We were never allowed to read Ero Chibi, and I was more interested in learning to fight at the time. I don't see what the big deal about having bad handwriting is though. It's important if you want to how to write seals, a voice said under them, causing them to look down. Sitting there with bug eyes was a little purple and green toad waving hello. Hey there, the name's Gamayan. At that, Naruto paused. He'd never had the chance to learn about seals, being too busy fighting his entire career to have time and sit down and study. Seals weren't like other ninja fields. It required patience in abundance, creativity and research, studying, memorizing forms and shapes before stringing them together to form a seal, none of which Naruto was inclined towards. But he acknowledged it was a powerful if esoteric field. Another thing, how'd you get here? I don't remember summoning you. When you summoned Pa Toad, he summoned me to remain in his place as liaison to make sure you were okay before he left. Nodding to himself, Naruto thought back to when he summoned Pa Toad yesterday. Flashback. He had been resting for a while after the battle royale between himself and his clones when he felt well enough to continue when he realized he had classes. Duh, I don't have all day to train like I do in the Hidden Leaf. I'm glad Pa Toad, Toads. Feeling stupid for forgetting the toads and reverse summoning, he quickly bit his thumb and did the hand signs. He felt at peace here, but he had to at least warn Kakashi and the rest about Sakura and Danzo's betrayal. Kachiyose no jutsu. Naruto exclaimed, slamming his hand on the ground. Naruto? Naruto-chan? A voice croaked in the smoke. Good to see you too, Gamma Gigi, Naruto chuckled. You're alive. A green elderly toad named Fukasaku exclaimed, causing Naruto to chuckle a little. What's so funny, little Naruto? Sorry, it's just that's the third time someone has said that to me, Naruto explained before getting serious. Gramps, I'm stuck in some alternative dimension thing. Is it possible to reverse summon me to Mount Myoboku and summon me to the Hidden Leaf? No, Fukasaku denied, making Naruto's heart drop. Summoning is a one-way street. You can only go from point A to point B. When I reverse summon you, then I can only take you back where you came from. Then what about reverse summoning me to Mount Myoboku and I take that month-long walk back to the Hidden Leaf? Naruto asked hopefully. That won't work either, Fukasaku said, making Naruto slightly downcast. That path is basically an exceptionally wrong reverse summoning. Every single dimension has a path to Mount Myoboku, hidden behind a secret waterfall with 2 stone toad statues guarding it. When you pass through that waterfall, it will take you to Mount Myoboku, but when you pass through it to go back, you will end up in the dimension you were in when you first passed through. So, I'm stuck, Naruto said bluntly. He was surprised though. He wasn't as sad as he thought he would be, considering that statement. I'm afraid so, but don't worry, we toads would be honored to be your liaisons to the Hidden Leaf. You may not be able to go there, but we can, Fukasaku said. You got it, Gramps. And, thanks for the help, Naruto said, sighing before remember his original purpose of summoning the toad. Oh, there is something of the utmost importance I need you to tell Kakashi for me. It's about how I got here. Danzo attacked me with his Nei members. We got into a scuffle, but before anything big happened, Sakura arrived. I thought I had back up and let my guard down when she hit me with something that threw me to this dimension. You have to alert Kakashi and the others before something big happens, and I know it will. Very well, it shall be done, but just in case, I suggest you continue with your sage training, as it will help you with your chakra control and patience to learn seals. When you perfect it, you should be ready to try learning your father's legacy. Great, Naruto muttered, hating the meditation process. Is that all then, Gramps? No, expect to be taken to Mount Myoboku soon. The great toad sage wishes to read your future soon, and Jiraiya left something for you. But with all the problems and the war, we never got the chance to pass you everything, along with all the scrolls your father left there as well. Naruto nodded in acknowledgement. Anyway, your father, Minato, had trained on Mount Myoboku a little, though he did not learn Sage Mode, but rather used the time to perfect his signature ninjutsu, the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. It needed a minimum usage of nature chakra to be infused with the seal to work. We were planning to teach him Sage Mode once he perfected his signature jutsu, but the third great shinobi war, his appointment as the 4th Hokage, his marriage and his anticipation for you ended up putting it on the back burner. That's great and all, but what's your point? Naruto asked. Huh? Oh sorry little Naruto. Old toads like me tend to ramble, Fukasaku apologized. The point is that your father left the scroll for his signature jutsu, as well as a scroll with all of the jutsus he knows. Awesome, Naruto exclaimed. Personally, he wouldn't mind getting his hands on those jutsus. For one, despite his SS ranking, he had little to no finesse in his somewhat limited range of jutsus and wanted to refine his techniques. What he did have, he used them the same way he did any other thing, full out and overpowered. As long as they were big, flashy, destructive and did the job, who needs finesse? Understood, Naruto saluted. But, I can only do mornings since I've gotten a job that requires me to be on site most of the day. I can only do before 8 o'clock. I understand, and I'll make sure to pass it on to the other toads, Fukasaku said before disappearing in a puff of smoke. End flashback. A talking toad. Yukari screamed, pointing at it amazed. This isn't like with a witch's familiar that only the witch can hear it. What are you? She's a summoned toad, Naruto explained. Ninja can make contracts with animals from the summoning dimension and call them up to help in fights or just to talk with them. Yup, when Grandpa summoned me I decided to stay hidden even after Grandpa left. Why? Naruto asked. To see if you could sense me, which you didn't, Gamayan accused. We'll have to figure out a tracking method for you, but for now I'm here to help you with learning seals. You will call me Yan-sama or Gama-sensei. Anything else and I'll hurt you. Oh yeah, Yanbon? Naruto stupidly said and fell to the floor twitching when Gamayan smashed his face in with a stick so hard he was pleading for a punch from Sakura. Listen well Naruto-chan tilde. I'm not like Grandpa Fukasaku who will take your disrespect, understand? Gamayan snarled at him. Yes Gama-sensei. Naruto squeaked out sitting in a Seiza position and bowing low. Yukari made a mental note to warn the others to show the same respect to Lady Yan that they showed to inner Mocha because she was just like her. Yan-sama. May I ask why you are here? Yukari asked nervously. Of course child, Gamayan said smiling kindly. Grandpa needed me to stay here to teach this brat how to make seals and to be the one to summon him back from Mount Myoboku when they summoned him there. Yukari was still confused, so Naruto explained about Mount Myoboku, reverse summoning and why he couldn't use it to get home. Luckily, Yukari was a genius and was quick to understand. Now, Chibi, I want you to help the brat work on his Japanese, Gamayan said. I'll teach him how to properly write as he goes along, but for his clone's safety when any of them write badly I'll only berate the real brat. And, so they began the lesson with Yukari explaining to the Narutos. The real one had an X painted on his chin. About the different forms of hiragana, katakana and kanji. The greatest surprise was when she had Naruto practice writing the hiragana alphabet and he wrote it terribly. Yan-sama wasted no time with beating him severely with her ruler and hitting hard enough to really bruise him. Every time he messed up, she beat him bad, and that included his clone's mistakes. By the time they finished for the night, Naruto was black and blue all over and looked more like he went 20 rounds with the nine-tailed fox. Yukari was shaking in fear, but was relieved that Gamayan was nice to her, even if the toad addressed her using Naruto's nickname for her. I think we'll call it a night, Gamayan said as she headed toward Naruto's front door. Don't worry about me brat, I set up my own room on your roof. Perfect, Naruto muttered. They had been at this for nearly 5 hours straight. It was almost time for the rest to arrive. Yukari, go back to your room and get your swimsuit and meet back here later, the rest are coming over as well, Naruto said before disappearing a swirl of leaves. Naruto reappeared in his room checking if Mocha was ready to wake up. He sat on the edge of the bed beside her, gently shaking her shoulders. Mocha simply latched onto his arms and nuzzled into the warmth before slowly opening her eyes in half-lidded confusion. He chuckled at the look, it was too adorable. Hey, you awake? I asked everyone to come over and hang out after I was done studying, it's almost time for everyone to get here, he said in a soft tone. Mocha nuzzled into his side a bit more before stretching and getting up and he heard the doorbell. Excusing himself, he sunshined to the living room and headed for the front door where Yukari and Kokoa were already waiting. He opened the door and let the two in. You two can go on in and look around, I'll wait here for the others. Naruto said. The two run into the house. He could hear them say, wow. Daizu, and, why is Naruto Nisama's room so much nicer than ours? Naruto chuckled at this. Kurumu and Mizore were the next to enter the house followed by Sukune and Ruby. He showed them the main part of the house. Wow Naruto, this is really nice. How come your room is so much nicer than ours? Mocha asks. Let's just say I made a little deal with the headmaster. Naruto said, winking at her. Now let me show you why I told you to bring your swimsuits. He said walking through the bathroom. He opened the door to show the pool. Yukari and Kokoa had already switched into their swimsuits. Yukari jumped off the diving board doing a cannonball and Kokoa sat in a chair near the side of the pool. Kurumu and Mizore quickly switched into their suits and jumped into the pool too. Mocha also put her suit on and sat near Kokoa. Ruby was swimming with Yukari. Naruto and Sukune put their trunks on last after the girls and walked into the pool room. Naruto ran to the diving board and did a double backflip off. Sukune walked over to where Mocha and Kokoa was since he knew they couldn't swim because they were vampires. Hey Mocha-chan, Sukune said as he sat next to Mocha. Kokoa growls and glares at Sukune then walks away. Hey Sukune, aren't you going to swim? Mocha asks. Nah, I fine just sitting here and talking to you. Sukune replies smiling at her. Naruto runs up to them. Hey Mocha-chan, why aren't you swimming? Mocha looks away a little sad and begins to talk. Well you see, If it's about you being a vampire and what water does to you, don't worry, this water perfectly safe," Naruto said, stopping her. Mocha looks at him with a quizzical look. "I asked the headmaster to fix the pool to where vampires could swim in it." Naruto insisted and hoisted her into his arms bridal style and jumping into the pool together with her in his arms shrieking. "What did you do that for?" Sukune asked, glaring at Naruto and ready to jump in the pool to save Mocha. "Oh, shut up and watch." Naruto laughed as he stood back up in the pool. Mocha stands up in the pool, her face screwed up waiting for the pain to hit before she slowly opened her eyes, looking around in wide-eyed confusion and shock that it didn't hurt like it should. "See, I told you," he yelled, jumping in the pool next to Mocha. "Thank you, Naruto." Mocha flushed a little at his thoughtfulness. The gang swam for a few hours. After that they all went back to the kitchen to get something to eat. Of course all Naruto had was instant ramen and some weird-looking drinks in the fridge. So everyone ate some ramen and drank whatever the strange liquid was. "Yum, this stuff tastes better than it looks. Daizu, Yukari say, since we still have a few hours, how about we play a game of cards?" Naruto asks. "Sure, what kind?" Sukune asks. "How about we make this fun by playing strip poker?" Naruto said while grinning. "Okay, sounds good to me, how about you, Mocha-chan?" Sukune asked. For some reason he was feeling a little light-headed and tipsy. The girls look at each other but figured what's the harm, it's only Sukune and Naruto. If they won it wouldn't even matter. Naruto quickly got the table ready. He shuffled the cards as everyone sat around the table. "Okay, you guys should already know most of the rules, right?" Naruto asked. They all nod yes. "Good, that will make this easier." "Okay, since you know the rules, we'll have it to where everyone that loses each round is to take a piece of clothing off. So the game goes faster," he said, dealing the cards out. They all take their hands and begin the game. The first round Yukari wins. After 7 rounds and a lot of drinks, all girls were down to their bra and underwear except Yukari, who was really lucky at cards and had almost all of her uniform still on. Even Naruto had had a few drinks by now and was down to his boxers. He saw that Mocha had on a set of frilly pink underwear on. Kurumu had on a yellow set with white polka dots all over. Mizore had a stripped blue and purple set on. And Ruby, oh Ruby, she had on the most bizarre one yet, it was a one-piece leather set for S+M. Both Naruto and Sukune had a nosebleed over that one. Sometime later on, Sukune must have accidentally knocked off Mocha's Rosario. For the silver-haired Mocha was sitting on the other end table playing cards with them. They were a little shocked at first when they finally notices, but didn't care because they were having too much fun. Another few rounds and everyone except Naruto and Mocha had passed out. Naruto was about to pass out himself but wanted to take the chance to talk to Mocha, but she had her own ideas. Mocha got up from the table and walked over to him, sitting back down on his lap, straddling his waist. She wrapped her arms around his neck and nibbled his ear. Naruto had to suppress the full-body shivers. "Oh Kami, you don't know what you do to me." She smirked at him, and right before they kissed she brought her head down and bit his neck, sucking his blood. After she finished she looked back into his eyes and was about to kiss him for real this time, but before she could, she noticed Naruto had already passed out from too much alcohol and the stress of Mocha being so close and so sultry. This made her laugh. She got up and took the Rosario from Sukune. Then walked over and picked Naruto up, taking him to his room. Well, what do we have here, Tilda?" A voice sing-songed as Naruto hugged his pillow, trying to hide from the sudden cold as his blanket was suddenly pulled off. My Mocha, I had no idea you could be so forward, Tilda." "Mocha?" Naruto thought, confused as he pushed heavily on his pillow. That's when something strange happened. His pillow moaned. Opening his eyes he saw his hand squeezing something soft and lacy. Lifting his head up, he nearly had a nosebleed as Mocha was in nothing but her bra and underwear while he had squeezed her breasts. Mocha woke up to that and stared wide-eyed at him as he was in nothing but in his boxers. She was so embarrassed, not just from the sight, but at the fact that when she woke up for a moment last night, she had happily nuzzled Naruto, thinking she was having a dream about their wedding night. And she couldn't deny that it was the best she had ever slept. "Ah!" Mocha shrieked as she jumped out of bed and ran behind the sing-songer, Kurumu. "Don't look, Naruto." Naruto, who was beat red himself, ran to the bathroom only for Yukari to be undressing to take a shower. Hearing the door open she saw Naruto standing there in his boxers. Yukari squealed. Oh, Naruto, I had no idea you wanted me already. Come, we can skip today and head to bed. Like hell I am you Ero Chibi. He yelled and slammed the door and took refuge in the thankfully empty guest room. Quite an excitable morning you're having, no? A voice said suddenly. Scared, Naruto looked around trying to find the source of the voice when all of a sudden the overhead light went into the ceiling and Mizore's head popped out. Shrieking, Naruto ran out of the room and dashed to the living room where an uncomfortable Sukune was sitting on the couch. Sukune, hide me, huh? Sukune said when Naruto jumped over his head and hid behind the couch. Naruto, of course, was hiding because he was afraid that the girls were going to beat him up for being a pervert and sleeping with a nearly naked Mocha. Oh Naruto tilde, a voice called out. Come out, wherever you are tilde. Don't wanna, Naruto replied making sure to echo his voice all around the room. You can come out Naruto, a fully dressed Mocha said soothingly. Promise not to hurt me? Naruto asked like a scared rabbit. Promise, Mocha replied smoothly. Can you get me clothes first? Naruto said realizing he was still in his boxers and Mocha blushed. Quickly she found a clean uniform and threw it to Sukune who threw it to Naruto. They heard some rustling and a mumbled curse about his fly before he hopped out with a crooked tie. Kurumu laughed at its poor state. Can't ya tie your own tie? Kurumu chuckled. Huh? Before looking down at his knotted up tie and blushing embarrassed. Mocha sighed and walked up to Naruto fixing his tie. There, she said patting his shoulder. All fixed. Thanks Mocha, Naruto said scratching the back of his head. Now, don't ya two look like a loving married couple, Gamayan said from the bookcase sipping tea. Naruto and Mocha looked at her and then at each other wide-eyed. Instantly, they jumped away from each other like they were burned and blushed. Sukune frowned at the statement, but Mizore and Kurumu loved it. But, aren't ya gonna be late at this rate? Everyone looked at the clock seeing that it was only 5 minutes before homeroom. Cursing, Naruto pushed everyone out, grabbed his, Mocha, and Yukari's bags and locked his door. Not wasting any time, he picked up Mocha bridal style and jumped off the building and landed on the nearest tree. Without breaking stride, he hopped from one tree to another at his fastest pace and jumped over the school gate. With only 30 seconds left, he ran up the wall and jumped into the classroom just as the bell rang. Safe, Naruto cheered causing everyone in the class to snicker. He set Mocha down, who promptly sat down due to dizziness, and took his seat next to her. It was another 5 minutes before the others arrived. Sorry we're late, Sukune apologized bowing. It's fine, Nekonomiya-sensei said waving them off. Just don't let it happen again. The rest of the morning passed by uneventfully had it not been for 3 things. 1. Naruto noticed that the one hiragana character he practiced last night looked a lot better than the rest of his writing. Cursing, he realized that Gama-sensei's method really was beating it into him. 2. He couldn't look Mocha in the eye after already sleeping in the same bed with her. No, don't think about her smooth why. No bad boy, no bad thoughts, good thoughts. 3. He was seriously getting annoyed. He kinda knew Sukune didn't like him getting close to Mocha, but this was ridiculous. He felt Sukune's eyes on the back of his head the entire day and a slight killing intent. Sighing, he shook his head, perhaps he should give them some time to get used to his presence. He needed the time away from Mocha anyway. Now that he had time to think back on the few days, the by-play he had observed among the friends had implied that Sukune already had a prior claim on Mocha and no matter what he didn't want to be called a home wrecker. Sakura and Sasuke was different. It was one of his bigger mistakes when he was young, along with his naivety. Now however, Sukune was his principal, the target to be protected. And Mocha was his first friend. He would bear and smile and be happy for them. Even if his heart shattered. Finally it was lunch and Naruto shimmered away before the others could catch him. Appearing on the top of a hill he'd seen from his penthouse window, Naruto couldn't help but lie down on the hill, watch the clouds and feel the breeze and relax, the increasing stress melting away. Naruto-kun? The blonde cracked open an eye and looked up from his temporary bed. Mocha was looking at him with a bag in her hands and an adorable questioning expression. What are you doing up here alone? He sighed and stretched, feeling content when several of his joints popped. I was just resting. Why? Did something come up? No, but you're resting? You didn't get anything to eat? I'm not that hungry. I thought you and the others usually had lunch together? Oh. Mocha looked down and began fingering the bag slowly. I see. It really didn't take much to figure out why she looked so sad. In fact, he suspected as much the moment he saw the bag held within her grasp. So much for staying away from Mocha. But if you want us to eat together, then it's all right with me. And just like that, Mocha's eyes lit up. Really? Yep. He sat up and patted on the spot next to him. Just because I wasn't hungry doesn't mean there's no space in my stomach. Mocha smiled and took her seat next to him. She crossed her legs and opened the bag, revealing a neat box inside. Seeing it, Naruto couldn't help but arch an eyebrow. He didn't expect her to make a bento, especially when both of them were very busy, no bad thoughts. Due to what happened just that morning. Still, it wasn't an unwelcomed lunch. He was pleasantly amused when his nose picked up the delicious aroma of rice, fried shrimp, and broiled squid. And who said vampires can't cook? I hope you like it. Mocha smiled and held out the box to him. I wanted to celebrate meeting you again, so I made this yesterday. I just warmed it up. That answered that question. She neglected to say that she did a good job too if it smelled that good. Naruto stared at the box, a second away from taking a bite from that delicious meal, when he suddenly thought of a mischievous idea. I have a better idea. Naruto grinned, baring his own set of fangs. Feed me. When she heard that, Mocha froze up. It took a moment for her mind to wrap around it. And even when it did, all she could say was a quiet, what? Come on. It's not like it's a big deal, right? Think of it as payment for feeding on me. Naruto chuckled and leaned back to a more comfortable position. Besides, I'm lazy. I'd rather starve to death than to get a good meal all by myself. You wouldn't want this poor, starving guy to die, would you? Despite herself, Mocha had to giggle at the ridiculous pleading expression that was on Naruto's face. It made him look incredibly endearing and mischievous all at once. It was almost the same expression as a fox when it's about to steal a piece of chicken from a picnic. Okay. Mocha smiled, still giggling slightly, and opened up the box, confirming Naruto's suspicions. Inside was a very neat display of rice, 3 pieces of fried shrimp, and a cluster of tiny broiled squid. It was the type of lunch that guys would kill to get from a girl. Mocha kneeled beside his prone form so she could feed him easier. Naruto was just dazed Mocha could be so daring, and from his vantage point near Mocha's lap, he got a very nice view of Mocha while she was giggling. I like the way your eyes sparkle when you laugh like that. Naruto's eyes went wide. He had not meant to say that out loud. Mocha's hand stopped preparing the food, unsure of what to do. The air was tense. She looked down into the intense blue eyes that were watching back apprehensively. Really? Her fingers went down to gently trace the whiskers and softly smiled as she could hear the humming from Naruto, almost like purring. So cute. It was almost as if they were in a trance. Their faces got closer to each other. Eyes never losing contact. Piercing blue and glittering emerald stared at each other. Inside, both Mochas were trembling. Last night's kiss didn't count. They were both intoxicated, and so was Naruto. He even fainted. One was trembling, conflicted but strangely warm and happy. The other was simply nervous, too happy, but too afraid this was a dream, of getting hurt. Inner Mocha rarely if ever let her feelings out in the open. She hid behind a mask of noble arrogance. Perhaps it was easier. But Naruto drew those feelings out. In his warmth, she felt exposed, nowhere to hide. She could feel his warm breath on her lips. Both of them had dazed, half-lidded eyes. Suddenly Naruto snapped his half-lidded eyes wide open and averted his face to avoid the inevitable. What am I doing? She has a boyfriend, he berated himself internally. Had he continued looking, he would have seen the disappointment and sadness of rejection on Mocha's face. Forcing himself to give a false smile, he looked back at her and immediately saw a conflicted expression. Seeing her expression, he immediately assumed it was because of his actions. He immediately took a step back and apologized. Oh yay, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done something like that. You already have a boyfriend. I'm sorry if I was being too forward. What? Naruto leaned back down in a relaxed position, his hands as makeshift pillows. You and Sukune are close, are you not? From what I've already seen, before I came, you two were everything but official couples. I did not want to break that up. Why, you're my first friend, and I want you to be happy, not be forced to choose between two people. He never saw the realization dawning on Mocha's face as the reason of his rejection was explained. He never saw the fist either. Bam! Naruto rolled around on the floor in pain. his hands covering his nose, and tears comically pouring down. Cammy, why? Do you enjoy seeing me get hit by women? I like this girl. I am so sorry. Inner Mocha managed to control my arm. I don't know why she hit you. Sorry. Mocha frantically tried to alleviate the pain, kneeling beside him and lifted her head onto her lap, using her handkerchief to stem the flow of blood from his nose. Naruto just chuckled. I don't like Sukune that way, anymore. The admission was soft, and was nearly blown away by the wind on that hill, but Naruto still heard it. He opened his mouth to respond, but Mocha, her face incredibly red, due to embarrassment from that admission, snapped and shoved some squid and rice into his mouth. Naruto chewed before laughing. They spent the rest of lunch break on the hill, enjoying the silent companionship. No words had to be said. Both knew their relationship had changed more than friends, not quite a couple, but did not know how to express it, due to both embarrassment and fear. Finally, at the end of the day, Naruto was approached by his homeroom teacher. Naruto, can you wait a moment? Nekonomiya-sensei said as the final bell rang. He shrugged. Sure teach, Naruto said, telling the others to go on without him. What can I do for you? Have you decided what club you're going to join yet? She asked, but then noticed Naruto giving her a blank stare. Oh, no one told you? All students are required to join at least one club to help them get a feel for human society. Really? Naruto asked rhetorically. Ya got any recommendations for me, teach? The newspaper club, she said immediately. All of your friends are in that club. Maybe, I'll think about it, Naruto said, leaving. He was surprised to see Mocha standing there waiting for him. Hey there, Mocha. You know you didn't have to wait for me. It's okay, I wanted to, she said, smiling with a blush. What did Nekonomiya-sensei want? I have to join a club, Naruto said. She told me you were in the newspaper club, is that true? Yup, it's a lot of fun too. We get to write all sort of articles and expose lots of truths, Mocha said. But we tend to get into a lot of battles because of it. Lots of battles, huh? Naruto thought slowly. Maybe I'll join, Naruto said casually. I hope you do. Only Kokoa has joined so far, Mocha said, frowning before perking up. We're actually having a meeting today, you can come if you want. Why not? Naruto said, giving a small smile that made Mocha's heart skip a beat. Lead the way, Oju-sama. 'Tis this way, Oji-sama, Mocha chuckled, pointing which way to go. They arrived soon enough, but when he got there he saw some brown-haired guy peeking at Mizore and Kurumu's panties. Mocha was glaring while Sukune tried to get him to stop. Kurumu and Mizore were blushing, and trying to stop him, but were too busy to stop him at the moment. Knock it off, Jin, Mocha shouted, blushing furiously. She hoped that such a scene wouldn't deter Naruto. Of course, she only thought that because she didn't realize that Naruto was the student of the greatest pervert ever. Let me handle this, Mocha, Naruto said as Jin turned toward them with stars in his eyes seeing Mocha. Oiroke no Jutsu. With a poof of smoke, Naruto transformed into a naked blonde pigtailed girl with a chest to rival Kurumu's. Do you want me, Jin-sama tilde? Why, Naruto asked, striking a pose, a seductive pout on her lips, and Jin flew back with a bloody nose. Naruto quickly changed back to normal, seeing the other girls staring at him disbelief. Sukune had passed out as well. What was that? Yukari asked, insanely jealous and just barely stopping a bloody nose. My number one anti-pervert technique. Oiroke no Jutsu, Naruto replied with a grin. It's a more advanced variant of the standard transformation technique that actually transforms my body into a girl's rather than the standard illusion. I created this accidentally as a prank against my old teacher Iruka, but because I had too much chakra I accidentally made the transformation solid. Something like a solid hit or touching too close won't re-transform me like a simple illusion would. This technique is more or less the predecessor to the cage bunshin technique I use, considering it uses the same principles of creating a solid shell with chakra, but outside the body rather than as part of it. Well, it's really effective, Mizore commented, kicking Jin in the side for peeking at her. He's completely knocked out. Who was that guy anyway? Naruto asked. Oh, our club president, Mocha stuttered, hoping it didn't bother him too much. Oh, okay. Wake up, ya pervy president. Naruto yelled, kicking him in the side. I want to join the club, so get up and welcome me. Huh? Jin said intelligently, holding his throbbing side. Who you? Name's Naruto Uzumaki and I'm your newest member. Are really? Jin asked, looking surprisingly excited. That's great. We have enough members now. What are you talking about, you perverted wolf? Kurumu asked, eyeing him suspiciously. Not telling until all of the members are her. Where's Kokoa? Jin asked, and as if on cue she entered in the room with Ko on her shoulder. Hey there, Ni-sama, what are you doing here? She asked, hugging his arm possessively. He just joined the club, Mocha told her, and Kokoa squealed in delight. This shocked everyone because they've never seen her act this way. Yukari personally believed that Kokoa actually liked him as much as she liked her, Ne-sama. Listen up, Jin called, sitting at the teacher's desk. Now that we have 8 members and stopped Kuyu's abuse of power last year, we can get some real press powers. That means I can get us press badges which will let us legally on any crime scenes as well as investigate any mishappenings in the monster world. If we can afford to go to the site, of course. I know we've basically done that, but most of it was done because it affected one of you guys rather than just investigating it. If you recall, I was the one that usually found scoops last year. No, we did. Kurumu interrupted indignantly. No, you stumbled upon stories that just happened to involve one of you and were juicy enough to print. Anytime real journalistic skills were needed, I was the one to get the information, Jin retorted. Like with the case of the missing girls last year that Hitomi Ishigami was turning into statues. I found out the missing girls and when they went missing. Wow, I never noticed, Yukari said, surprised. But, he's right, and here I thought he did nothing. Perverts like him tend to make you think that, Naruto said, laughing a little bitterly. My master was probably the biggest pervert to ever live, and if you looked at him you would think he did nothing but drink, spy on girls in baths and write smut. But he actually had one of the biggest and best spy networks in the world. Never underestimate a person. Everyone was surprised at what Naruto said because it reminded them that there may be more to Jin than what they usually see. Kurumu and Mizore realized that they should have known this by how well he trained them when the school was closed early last year. Mocha, both Mochas, noticed that when Naruto talked about his master he always used the past tense, and that made them sad if their suspicions are correct. Great, but first I want to know about you, Naruto, Jin said. After the Kuyu incident last year, I think it's best if I know up front what kind of people I'm dealing with. And, so Naruto gave him a quick review of whom and what he was. Jin, of course, thought he was awesome, but Naruto really won him over when he gave him a copy of Make Out Paradise. He had a bunch of the books in a storage scroll that Jiraiya made him carry on the road sales, when they needed quick money because Jiraiya had spent it on his research. Welcome to the club, Jin said enthusiastically while everybody cheered. Even Sukune couldn't help but be happy for a new member, and at least he wasn't trying to take advantage of Mocha or the girls like the guys at the beginning of the year wanted to. Glad to be here, Naruto said, grinning. Now, due to the fiasco of last year's school festival that caused the school to close down, the headmaster has decided to have a dance to commemorate the reopening of the school and to celebrate the new school buildings. Naruto noticed the sheepish looks all around but decided to ask later, as the newspaper club, with real journalistic powers, the headmaster has decided to let us make a report on how the school committee deals and organizes the dance behind the scenes, as well as free tickets to the dance for all of us. The dance is in 1 month. Tomorrow we can go and see the first meeting for the dance as well. Everybody cheered at the idea of a dance. Mocha looked at her ticket, she knew who she wanted to take her to the dance, and shyly glanced at said person who was across the room. Her emerald eyes met blue eyes which were also observing her, causing her to go red. Again, B.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.